Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to support the budgetary proposal presented in this honorable chamber by the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael Northeast. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I go into my fuller presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the constituents of St. Michael West Central, who in their numbers came out and supported me in the last election, causing me to be here in this August chamber once again. So I would like to express my thanks to them and also to my campaign team. Somebody who was also very close to me in the campaign and who served in this honorable chamber before he retired. I refer to the former honorable member for St. Michael North. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to him because he too would have helped me as a member when he was in this chamber to learn and understand the ropes associated with politics. And I take this opportunity to salute him as well. He's one person who I can say came to politics. Nobody had a bad word to say about him in the political domain. He came with his character intact and he left with his character intact. And I also would like, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to express my thanks as well to my predecessor, the former member of Parliament for the City of Bridgetown, for an outstanding job in leading in the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, we went through a campaign, and during that campaign, we had the opportunity to discuss issues and to present proposals to the people of Barbados. And during that campaign, it was almost like there weren't any issues because the Barbados Labour Party did an outstanding job in the first term in managing the Barbados economy, picking up from where it was and directing it and taking it in a new direction. So much so that I believe that we made the job look so easy, so simple, that people couldn't understand how we got it done. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, we went through an election campaign where we didn't have many issues to deal with roads and water and public transport. In fact, there were none issues in my opinion. And this was due, in my judgment, to the government being responsive, having listened, having talked to the country, and having talked through issues with the people of Barbados. And I dare say that as long as we continue to be responsive, as long as we continue to listen and respond to the people of Barbados, I think we will continue to earn their trust and their confidence. And that was confirmed during the last election campaign when we were returned to office. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the budget presentation last Monday, in my opinion, was a response to the reality of what a small, developing country is now faced with as a consequence of global events. So that when the Prime Minister came to this chamber and announced the incentives for the electrification of vehicles in Barbados, you couldn't help but to congratulate the Honourable Prime Minister for using the occasion when oil prices will continue to go through the roof to incentivize a population to go the route of energy-efficient vehicles. That was a response to the realities that we are faced with today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the pandemic levy, and even though there are some persons who will wish to criticize it, and that's a natural thing, the pandemic levy, in my judgment, is also a very novel idea. Here it is that a government that kept the public service intact, that maintained employment levels in the public sector, here's a government that, notwithstanding a pandemic, provided vaccines and boosters for its citizens. A government that secured the future of Barbados, and they did so at a time when we had less revenue than we have had in a long time in Barbados. And that's why I say that this budget was a response to the realities that we are now facing as a result of the global disruption. So that if anybody were to complain, and I think there are a few of those, we have to remind the country that we went through a pandemic, that we managed the pandemic well, and that we provided hope for people in very difficult times. Now, this global disruption, as we all know, will cause oil prices to increase, and ultimately the cost of goods to increase. The cost of drugs, for example, and medical supplies as a consequence of the global disruption will increase, and it will have a devastating impact on the supply chain, and certainly we can see what is happening with the logistics. We have a situation where we have looming on the horizon the microbacterial resistance, which could potentially become a major event in Barbados. And when we look and see how our government performed in the last term, and when we look and see how we are performing in this term, I say to the people of Barbados that all is well with the government of Barbados and the Barbados Labour Party. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am responsible for the Ministry of Health and Wellness, including the hospital. And we know that the government does not have unlimited resources, and therefore the call on government for additional revenue, especially at this time, will be difficult. And therefore, accountability, cost containment, out-of-the-box thinking, reduction in leakage, new purchasing practices, to mention a few, shall be the center of our operations within the Ministry of Health. Because, like I said, we cannot, certainly in the Ministry of Health, have an unlimited call on the cash flows of the government. All of us, therefore, who work now to help direct the affairs of this country, will have to maintain the highest standards of accountability. And I start with me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a minister in my ministry. And that goes all the way down to all heads of departments, to those who work in our healthcare institutions and look after us, and the wards and administration and the maintenance, to cite a few. But, Mr. Speaker, every area in which money will be spent. And the ministry would no doubt have to be evaluated monthly against established benchmarks and service improvements. It is widely accepted, Mr. Speaker, that the QEH is a centerpiece in providing quality health care in Barbados. And therefore, we have to do what is necessary to get it right and to improve upon the many successes that we've had at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It is our main hospital. It is a major acute care facility, and therefore, we have to improve it as we go along. And it is instructive to note that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was opened in 1964. And even though it's seen critical improvements in surgical intensive care unit, for example, and general improvements to the overall plant, other upgrades are indeed necessary. And therefore, the hospital must now embark upon a major capital expenditure program. And over the next 5 years, the proposed capital expenditure program will be designed to fund the replacement of equipment that has passed the manufacturer's recommended useful life. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the capital expenditure plan will also see the purchase and replacement of equipment on a phased yearly basis. We have to ensure that when we procure equipment, we also look at what is available in terms of modern technology, and we have to incorporate that in a capital expenditure plan as we build out our medical equipment, because that is absolutely necessary as we continue to improve the quality of care at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And it doesn't mean that we are going to spend all of the money in 1 year, because oftentimes that is a mistake that happens. And we saw that when another administration was in government, when elected to buy a lot of units at one time. And we must never ever make the mistake. We must continue to build out on a yearly basis the capital requirements for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. It is absolutely necessary, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we build out additional capacity at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Now you may ask why. The time has come where we have to look and see how best we can build out additional capacity, be it across the street, so that we can free up additional space that we otherwise occupy for offices to ensure that we expand the range of clinical services that we have at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. For example, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the current lab at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has outgrown its location and is absolutely necessary. And that is why you have the Barbados Labour Party as a very visionary party and government. We have to look to build out new facilities to improve the quality as well as to improve the technology. And the oncology area at the hospital, the waiting area, for example, that is another area where we're going to have to look and see how best we can rework the floor space in order to give patients that necessary screening and also give the area some enhancements. Mr. Deputy Speaker, a strategic replacement capital expenditure program would also have the consequences of reducing the recurrent expenditure at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I explain that. Oftentimes, when you have equipment that has not been replaced over time, you end up spending more money on maintenance. And that is part of your recurring expenditure. So what this government is proposing at this time, notwithstanding all the difficulties that we're encountering, we are proposing to have that phase capital expenditure program to take some of the pressure off the Queen Elizabeth Hospital's cash flow. And it's as simple as that. It is known to most that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital currently spends about approximately $10 million a year on maintenance. And if we can lower that cost, it therefore means that the amount of money that the central government has to transfer to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on an annual basis could be reduced as long as we phase in a capital expenditure program. But I would also say that in any capital expenditure program, there must be a program for structured maintenance. It is important because if we maintain our equipment, we will have a longer useful period of life with that equipment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the capital expenditure improvement program as proposed for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital alone cannot improve the financial performance of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Cannot. The cost of health care, as we know, all over the world has gone up. And therefore, other critical cost management interventions will be implemented. I'm not going to take the Parliament through all the cost interventions that are proposed and that are needed, but I will highlight one such example. Take the issue of inventory control. We all know that inventory control is critical to the management of operations and companies. Mr. Speaker, we have to first review, then manage the cost of drugs in Barbados. We have to implement a new inventory control system with barcoding capabilities to manage the inventory of drugs, other supplies, equipment. We have to do it because we have to reduce wastage. We have to track the movement and cost of drugs, whether they're going to the wards, operating theaters, and we have to effect better purchasing prices and yields associated with pricing to reduce the cost of drugs to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we also have to ensure that our purchasing practices will ensure that we manage the purchase of drugs relative to the expiration date of drugs to save costs, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and to dramatically reduce the overall cost of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So we are going to do that. It is clear that with a well-established, in fact, that it costs the Queen Elizabeth Hospital approximately $19 million to purchase drugs annually. And if, through a program of inventory control and efficiency gains and effective cost controls, we can reduce that cost. By doing that, it reduces the cost that the taxpayer will have to pay, but at the same time, it reduces the burden that the government will have to meet in respect of patient care at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Mr. Speaker, and I have not even mentioned the benefits of bulk purchasing. Because if we have the benefit of bulk purchasing, we would even save more money. And those are some of the reforms and those are some of the ideas that we have to put in place. So in other words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're going to have to take a fresh guard and look at our costs and our controls and our procurement of drugs to see how best we can aid in saving money. We are not going to compromise, Mr. Speaker, patient care. And that is clear. We are not going to compromise patient care. But what we want to do, and it's not novel, it's nothing new, we want to implement a program where persons who have personal health insurance can use their health insurance when they go to the pharmacy to assist with the reduction in cost to the community hospital. You're not asking them to pay. We're asking that those who have personal insurance can help the hospital to reduce its costs by utilizing their personal health insurance. And we are going to obviously have the required public education program in order to facilitate this. And we should also think about it, because I know one of the issues that will arise is the issue of co-pay. And oftentimes, if you present an insurance company will say, well, it's 80%, but you have to pay a 20% co-pay. But that is an internal issue that can be settled on the co-pay. But I make the point that 80% is greater than 100% of zero. And if we can do that, I think it will help to contribute to the improved operations at the hospital. Yeah. So that there are things that we have to do. It is out of the box thinking, but we have to look and see how best we do it. Because at the hospital as well, the service is provided for all Barbadians. But if we can find a system, a way of encouraging Barbadians who have personal health insurance to use their personal health insurance at the hospital, I think that will go a long way in terms of helping us in respect of the benefits. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we can do that, I am sure that it will reduce the burden of the taxpayer has to pay. And like I said, it is simply a matter of how you manage it, and it's simply a matter of how you communicate it to the country. The cost at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, to run a hospital in Barbados, a public hospital, is about $200 million alone. If you factor in a capital expenditure program and you were to say let's average at 7%, that 7% would probably yield you another $14 million. And in total, to run the hospital plus a capital expenditure program would be $214 million. But a government can't transfer $214 million to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital at this time, when it has other ministries and agencies and departments of government that require funding as well. And we have to look at the total picture and see how best we can make this work and make it a fit for the country. So that if we can find opportunities to reduce costs, to enhance efficiencies, and to make the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, through efficiencies, less of a burden on the consolidated fund, that would certainly go a long way, I think, Mr. Speaker. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, that there's a lot of work that we have to do. And we are going to do it in the interest of Barbadians. And I say to Barbadians that is absolutely necessary that at this point in time, that we look, that we see what has to be done, and that we do what is required, especially in these times when there's so much uncertainty in Barbados. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it would be remiss of me as well not to say to you that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is going to implement a new electronic records patient management program. And in doing so, thank you. Thank you. And in doing so, that program would help us with the management of patient records. It would then be extended to the polyclinics, and eventually we would wish to extend it to doctors, obviously with the required levels of security. We also have to ensure that we improve customer service. And I had the opportunity to visit the Harrison Spoik isolation facility. And in visiting that facility, I recognize that they have a wonderful program, a client relations department, which is essentially a customer service department, but more with an interactive intervention. And I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that that program should be replicated at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, because what is critical, especially in a hospital, is to ensure that you have people who can interact with persons. If they have any questions, deal with them. If they have any concerns, manage their concerns. If they have any queries, get back to them. And that is what we will have to do at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
Honourable member, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I know what is at stake. And what is at stake now in Barbados is the ability to ensure that we manage health care. And as I have done, I've walked the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I've not visited every department, but like a true hospitality operator, you walk, you observe, you listen to the customers, you listen to the workers there, you hear, and then you plan to see how best you can improve it. And as I continue the visitation to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we will endeavor to improve the level of service. The service is good, but we have to take it to another level. And like everything else, we have to do what we have to do to ensure that we make the Queen Elizabeth Hospital an iconic institution as we know it is. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I apologize if I appeared I spent so much time on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But the Queen Elizabeth Hospital for us is an institution that we have to upgrade and that we have to improve. Like I said, it was an institution that has been there since 1964. And like all other institutions, we will have to upgrade and improve. But Mr. Speaker, generally in the Ministry of Health, as we continue to intensify our efforts, we will continue to focus on delivering primary health care to all Barbadians. We will continue to maintain our outreach at the polyclinics and get back to what we are good at, because obviously within a COVID environment, our resources were somewhat redirected to manage the COVID situation. Now that is coming under control, the ministry will get back to what I refer to as its non-COVID agenda. Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind the country that the health sector is becoming one of the fastest growing sectors for employment. And when you look around in Barbados and see what we are doing in Barbados with respect to investments in healthcare, especially private investments in healthcare, you will note that there will be opportunities for many Barbadians to take advantage of. The government recently announced and budgeted in next year's estimates the sum of almost $2 million as an incentive for nurses to pay them stipend for persons who are prepared to go to the Barbados Community College and study nursing. And that is a step in the right direction. A government that is planning for the future, a government that understands its responsibility and its human resources, $2 million incentivizing. And I would like to encourage Barbadians to think about all the other careers in that healthcare sector and to exploit them and to get the training, because it will become an area of an area of priority in the job market. Mr. Speaker, and I don't intend to go afoul of the rule, as I wrap up, I want to tell you that the challenge ahead will be a significant one. But I am confident that the skills that I developed in the private sector will see me through. It is not going to be easy. To make all these changes and improvements will not happen overnight, but we have to ensure that Barbadians are given the standard of care that they're known for, and that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital continues to be that solid as a rock teaching institution. And as we go forward, I am sure that when we return to report, that the hospital will be in a position to report on some of the gains that it has made. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As I begin, sir, let me lend my voice on behalf of the people who were gracious enough to reinvest their confidence in me, the good people of the constituency of St. James Central. Let me, sir, lend my voice of congratulation to the Honourable Prime Minister, and by extension, sir, the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance, for the craftsmanship of this very progressive and visionary financial statement which we are debating tonight. Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not say those things out of empty adulation for the work done by the Honourable Prime Minister and the Honourable Minister in that ministry. I say so, sir, on the basis of the empirical evidence of the extent of myopia which exists on the other side of the political fence. And it is important, sir, that we do not come here and indulge ourselves in what is possible to become, if we're not careful, what could be described as a mutual admiration society. Because on the outside, ex cathedra, this House of Parliament, sir, there are those elements who continue voluntarily so to be agents of disinformation and misinformation, and that is to put it at its best. If I put it, sir, at its lowest, there are persons who are abjectly unaware and ignorant of that which is taking place in this country and do not want to improve their status and their lot. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to be eternally vigilant in this political chamber about the politics that confronts this country. And I say that, sir, because it was only within the last 12 hours or so that a call-in program took place in Barbados, which portrayed with abundance of clarity the same concern that I raised. And yesterday, sir, there were two proponents, or two representatives, rather, of the Democratic Labour Party. The party still exists. On Voice of Barbados, making their contribution to what was purported to be a people's reply to the budgetary statement by the Honourable Prime Minister. Now, sir, I will not offend your ears, or by extension those of the honourable members of this House, by getting into that which they engaged in. But suffice to say, sir, that part of this journey of transformation, I am now abundantly satisfied, part of this journey of transformation must include the constant re-education of the people of this country so that they can be on their guard. They must be kept on their guard, sir, against the charlatans and the political three-card men who will run amongst the people of this society. And Mr. Speaker, sir, what we heard yesterday on Voice of Barbados from those two lost souls, Twiddly Dee and Twiddly Dum, what we heard, sir, was, no, honourable members laugh, but this is not a laughing matter. What we heard, sir, was a matter of deep regret, because a prime minister comes to the country and does that which no other prime minister in the history of Barbados has been able to do. And let me be specific on the two counts. The Honourable Prime Minister came here yesterday, sir, and pronounced that there was going to be an arrangement, or there is an arrangement, between the BADMC and C.O. Williams and Company for there to be the development of land at Lears for the purpose of agricultural development in this country. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that should be a matter that would cause any right-thinking Barbadian, when they hear that 100 acres of land at Lears is going to be put into agricultural production for the assistance of the people of this country and the feeding of the families that sent us here, sir. That should not be a matter to engage in politically and raise specious nonsense about whether the land at Todd's couldn't be used. And they should be the last people to visit Todd's in an argument, sir, because Todd's continues to be wrapped up in the latter stages, as I understand it, of the litigious process. But it was wrapped up in the litigious process because of the mismanagement of the Democratic Labour Party. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, as though that were not bad enough, they then descended into the quagmire, sir, to find fault with the regional compact between the People's Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Mr. Speaker, and Barbados. And what is that compact? That Barbados will become a logistical hub in which Guyanese food product would come to Barbados. It would be blast frozen. Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be stored, it would be packaged, it would be redistributed out of this country, well, first of all, across this country, and then out of this country to the wider CARICOM basin. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is an idea whose time has come. That is not something to find fault with and to make sport at. So that goes to the gravamen of emancipating ourselves from the shackles of dependency that have stymied the development of this country. And by extension, Mr. Speaker, sir, I must speak to you as a minister, designated senior minister with responsibility for the productive sector. It is an empirical fact, sir, that our productive sectors have to have their potential unleashed if it is that we are going to be able to maximize the revenue earnings of foreign exchange that this country must be able to reach. And that is what these interventions in the agriculture sector have been designed to do. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is something that when I was a boy, youngster at university, not a boy, not so long ago, I read Professor C.Y. Thomas, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. I read Professor C.Y. Thomas on this issue. I read the erudition of Professor Norman Gervan on this issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. Professor George Beckford on this issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. Those were the academicians that were postulating exactly what the Prime Minister of Barbados came to this Parliament and articulated 2 days ago. But beyond that, the political giants of the Caribbean, the founding fathers of CARICOM, Errol Walton Barra, now the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barra, and Forbes Burnham in Guyana, they were aspiring to achieve that which me, Amor Motley, the Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados, was able to achieve here yesterday, or day before yesterday, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if you for a moment doubt, because there are too many within earshot of my voice, not in here. The people of Barbados were wise enough not to allow them to come in here. But too many within earshot of my voice, sir, who no longer read. And because they do not read, sir, I must read for them. And I'm going to quote, Mr. Speaker, sir, an extract from a speech given by Errol Barra. It is called Caribbean Integration, the Reality and the Goal. It was issued, sir, in Georgetown, Guyana, on the 3rd of July, 1986. And he says, Mr. Speaker, the University of the West Indies has provided us over more than one generation with some very remarkable social scientists. I recall with certain pride the excellent work which was done by the New World Group over the 1960s. Every major sector of our economic life has come under their scrutiny: sugar, bauxite, oil, tourism. There was, however, no link between that great storehouse of knowledge and the toiling mass of workers who are the motor force of this society like any other. The analysis may be brilliant, the recommendations are very ingenious, but these will serve a very limited purpose if their content does not become an essential part of the consciousness of the working population of this region. This has been the curse of our society, sir. This is Arabara. This has been the curse of our societies. That division between those who work exclusively with their brains and those who we think work only with their hands, when the truth is that all men and women, irrespective of occupation, have to work with their brains. But this division of labor has made us most vulnerable where we need to be the most resilient. And I speak specifically of food and food production, because that is where we are the most vulnerable as a region. It is as though we had chosen to betray the blessings which God and nature have bestowed upon us. Surrounded by the richest of seas, we condemned ourselves to the importation of fish. Our lands can provide almost every known food crop, yet we persist in the luxury of imported vegetables. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, was Arabara in 1986. Speaking, sir, to that which the Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados laid in this House, a plan, sir, a concrete plan for the reversal of a suicidal tendency which has pervaded our history, Mr. Speaker. And I cry shame. I cry shame, sir, as I make this a document of the House, on the hostility directed, sir, to the collaboration on the production of food and the distribution of food in this region. Because self-sufficiency, I say again, sir, is our greatest resilience. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I go further. I want to say that it is important for us also to reflect a little bit on the challenges we face with respect to what I can only call the impulsive criticism that we see in this country. Impulse criticism as opposed to informed comment. And there's too much impulsive criticism in this place. I, sir, make no apology for saying that and I do not know if I'm alone, but I, sir, having been elected by the people, believe I should be criticized by the people. I have no difficulty at all with the people of Barbados finding fault with me and doing their best to hold me accountable. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, they are not entitled to their own facts. You are entitled to your opinions. And what I have heard with respect to the energy sector, sir, disturbs me. And if I have to spend 2 minutes this evening to give tutorials to people in the Democratic Labour Party, forgive me, Mr. Speaker, if I must do so. Because I have heard people now making the unfortunate comparison between the price at the pump in Barbados and the price at the pump in the OECS countries. So gasoline in Barbados is how much ever dollars per litre. Gasoline in St. Lucia is less, so the government of Barbados is at fault. Gasoline in Dominica is less, so the government of Barbados is at fault. Gasoline in Antigua is less, so the government of Barbados is at fault. And on its face, that seems cute. When the truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that folks must be invited at some point to pause to think. And when they start to think then, sir, they come to understand, hopefully, that there is a thing in Barbados called a price structure. And the price structure is made up with respect to the petroleum products that we buy, sir, of fuel tax, which has replaced our road tax. So the first thing is that you no longer pay a road tax as well as pay for gas in Barbados. The fuel tax is wrapped into the gas, the price you pay at the pump. It gives you a latitude. And one of the things this country has to be prepared to start to talk about, and I've discussed this with my permanent secretary as recently as this morning, is the need for us to confront the reality of conservation. Because, sir, it is that we have a fuel tax which is driving the price of some of the fuel product higher, but you still have an element of control in many cases, not all, over the amount of driving that you do. And you can do things that are happening in other parts of the world. For example, carpooling. because their husbands and wives or boyfriend and girlfriend who cohabit both got a motor car and both leave home every morning to drive down to Bridgetown every day, sir, to drive back home. And there's an insistence on the part of both that I must be independent of the other because I must be able to move freely. And while I understand that that is important in some households and for a variety of motives, I also wish to say, sir, that if you're going to seriously speak to energy conservation, these are the things that we've got to start to talk about. And in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, sir, the component, the price structure includes the value-added tax, which we capped. It also includes an excise tax. But, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that those taxes which comprise the fuel structure in Barbados at the pump are paid into the consolidated fund. And the consolidated fund, sir, is the point which the Minister of Finance goes to draw from when the Minister of Finance has to provide services that do not easily find themselves replicated, if they are replicated at all, across the Eastern Caribbean. What services am I talking about? Free education, sir, pre-primary to university level, not easily found replicated across the rest of the Caribbean. I'm talking about universal health care, Mr. Speaker, sir, at the point of delivery, not easily replicated across the Caribbean. I am talking, Mr. Speaker, sir, about the home health for the elderly, the octogenarians in our community, Mr. Speaker, sir, not replicated across the Caribbean. I'm talking, Mr. Speaker, sir, about the subsidized bus fare, again for the elderly. Public transportation, not easily replicated across the Caribbean. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, when these people are talking, what they are implicitly saying is that the old lady who lives in Deacon's Farm, sir, should pay her bus fare. They're implicitly saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the old man who is in a wheelchair in his home in Ferniehearst, Mr. Speaker, sir, should have no home help. That's what they're saying. And that, sir, is something that I must contest with every fiber of my being. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am mindful that the clock tends to race, and I have to keep a pace with it. And I want to turn to the energy sector more fully. I am one, sir, who must be candid with this House. I feel that we have come to the point in Barbados where we are at a stage of political ontogenesis. It is an interesting chemical term, my friend, a scientific term, my friend, the honourable member from Christchurch, West Central, chuckles, because he, as a chemist, knows, as a scientist knows, that ontogenesis, sir, is that study of the species that allows every species, sir, you see how a species adapts, how it changes in order to survive. It is equally true in the social sciences, Mr. Speaker, that every civilization and every society must at some stage make necessary fundamental changes in order to adapt and in order to survive in changing environments. And if I have to give the tutorial, I will give it. And Mr. Speaker, sir, if we do not do that, then we face the prospects of failure. Barbados is at that crossroads. And we have to recognize, not only because of the decade, that lost decade that we are recovering from, but also because of the superimposition on top of that pain of COVID, and on top of the pain of COVID, Mr. Speaker, the fact that this country is part of a world which is creeping ever closer to war, because the most industrialized of the continents is the continent that is facing war right now. And the consequential knock-on and commodities pricing and fuel pricing and every other pricer is something that we have to be eternally vigilant about. And Mr. Speaker, sir, once we have to understand that, then we have to get real about our relationship with our utility. And I am not going to say as Minister of Energy that I believe that there is a panacea, sir, in any adversarial relationship with the Barbados Lighting Power. Yes, it is a monopoly. Yes, it is a monopoly that has been around for over 100 years. But I want to respectfully submit to this country through you, sir, that it is a monopoly that has been around for over 100 years, owned by foreigners now, sir, that it, like any other capitalist investment that has been in Barbados for 100 years, has had to endure a tortured history because that has been the relationship between capital and labor over the last 100 years and more in this country. That labor and capital have had a tortured history for the most part based on sociological reasons that I don't have the time to go into now, sir, but we all know the story of race, class, and the Barbadian evolution. Let us understand that. But equally, sir, let us understand that the maintenance of a hostile or an adversarial posture with the utility is not, in my judgment, the best way forward. Better it is, in my view, to leverage the mutual strengths and the mutual objectives that government has and that the utility has in the interest, sir, of the people of this country who are ultimately the consumers. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to give you an example of some of those strengths. Governments and interests. Government strength and interests, Mr. Speaker, sir, lie in the fact that we have set for this country a 2030 target by which we want to become entirely fossil fuel free. We are interested, Mr. Speaker, sir, secondly, in having low-cost renewable energy. We are equally interested, Mr. Speaker, sir, in having a reliable mix of technologies. Wind, sir, photovoltaics for the sun, the use of the waves, the natural resources of the country being deployed for energy purposes. On the other side of the mix, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have the utility, and it has its strengths. The strengths that we must leverage, sir, as the substantial capital of the utility here and its parent company, Emera, in Canada. The fact, sir, that they have made an investment in Barbados and that they have substantial funds to sit on where they want to further invest, sir, in an environment which we have worked hard on to be one of the most hospitable environments for investment to be found anywhere in the world. And Mr. Speaker, sir, they have technical capacity and competence. Now, sir, once we are able to understand that the two sides have their mutual strengths and interests, then it makes sense, in my view, to come together and have some discussions, bearing in mind a few overarching principles. And the Prime Minister outlined the most overarching of the principles, which is that at no stage, Mr. Speaker, sir, can we forget that all Barbadians must be part of this journey to transform energy in this country. And if I could add in my little bit, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is my position that there should be no energy poverty in Barbados, that there must be equality of access and opportunity for all to sit at a table. This Barbados must not be like so many other instances where in the energy history of the world there have been those who have and those who do not have, and never the twain shall meet. Having set that position, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe that it is clear that the Prime Minister has gone once again where no others have been able to go. Because what we have heard this week is a Minister of Finance, for the first time, I believe, in the Caribbean, making the statement that as of right, all householders must have access to the energy benefits of the country, as of right. And it therefore means now, sir, that we in the Ministry of Energy must move towards automaticity of the applications, and that the process that we inherited, and let us remind the Democratic Labour Party, because I find, sir, if I can say so respectfully to my colleagues, that sometimes we talk in here as though we forget we're in a political institution. It is a parliament elected through a political process. There was a Democratic Labour Party government in which the minister responsible for energy was the Prime Minister, Frandl Stewart. And when we came to office, sir, these people who clamor now for there to be more applications rolled out faster. And I am the first to say we're going to go faster and faster. We're at the rate now of doing 400 or 500 every month. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we first came to office, the Honourable Member from Christchurch East was the first Minister of Energy under this administration. He will bear witness to the fact that they were producing energy licenses at the rate of 68 every year. Every year. Now we are at the rate of doing 500 a month, Mr. Speaker, sir. We will involve the people by way of removing now moving now in the process towards automatic granting of licenses for homeowners who, sir, are seeking to have photovoltaics installed on their roofs, but it would have to be, sir, subject to certain specific conditions of the application process. Because we must have a clearly defined, and we will have to work this out, the size of the property and the amount of allocated PV for each property, depending on its size. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, what is the next thing? We have to have a conversation, sir, about the public benefit, and how the public benefit can be shared. And I am determined, sir, that there must be a public benefit which is shared equitably. And of what do I speak? Let me give you an example. I stand opposite the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, and the Honourable Prime Minister has pointed to the fact that we want to put 30 megawatts of wind energy investment into St. Lucie, an investment that will be made largely by the Barbados Light and Power. We have had the discussions, sir.
You have 5 more minutes.
We have had the discussions, Mr. Speaker, sir, to adjust that investment so as to allow, sir, for the Barbados Water Authority to participate as a co-investor. And why? Because the Barbados Water Authority, sir, is one, the single largest consumer of electricity in Barbados. Secondly, sir, it is an important and rather it is an indispensable part of the livelihoods of every single person that we represent. Everyone. Tonight, in Redmond Village, St. Thomas, and in Q-Land, St. Thomas, there is concern about the water supply. In St. Joseph, Mr. Speaker, a battle was fought for years about the water supply. We have all through the north fought that battle, sir. There needs to be a way in which we can ensure that the Water Authority has access to the funds available in order to replenish, renew its mains, expand its network of mains. Mr. Speaker, sir, it comes at a cost because there was never any thought given to how this is going to be done during the time of the Dems. There was no money to do it when we came to office. We have miles and miles of mains, nearly 1,600 kilometers of mains across Barbados that are over 100 years old and need to be replaced. But by allowing the Water Authority to be a co-generator, plugging into the grid, deriving some benefits from being on the grid, Mr. Speaker, sir, that financial benefit and reward, that return on investment is now able to be plugged into the mains replacement program, taking it off of the backs of the people that you represent, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, as I close, let me speak a little bit to the need for public co-investment, because you heard the Honourable Member speak about battery storage. It is essential if we're going to have grid stability with renewable energy that when you have the variations, it is not always a windy day, it is not always a sunny day. And you must have that stability by way of your battery storage that you can then make your adjustments easily. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the investment in battery storage for Barbados is going to be over 200 megawatts. It runs into hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, sir. Where's the money to come from? The lead on that investment, the discussions that we're having, would properly be the utility, because they have the technical competence. They sit on the depth of capital. But the condition of the participation as lead must be equally, sir, that along with that comes the investment opportunity for the citizens of this country, the credit unions of this country, the civic society in Barbados, the churches in Barbados, sir. Whosoever wishes to participate must have a seat at the table, sir, and the necessary vehicle will be constructed for them to participate. Why do we need to go forcibly ahead and urgently ahead at this time? We do so, sir, because all across the world, in Europe, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the United States, everybody has sat and watched Vladimir Putin and has made up their mind they will no longer be harnessed to a dependency on oil and gas economy. They want to be liberated and find renewable energy as the way forward and not held hostage. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to build up the skill so that when we go into the market, we are not looking for little nay, poo-poo investment. We have to go for a large enough investment that you capture the eye of those people who are manufacturing. And then they say, well, look, little Barbados coming for 200 million, a fellow over there that only want only 200 megawatts, a fellow over there that only wants 50 megawatts, let him wait, we're going to give Barbados. Because if there's one thing we learned with COVID and the vaccine, unless you're going for large scale, you will wait to the end. And this economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, must never, under the Barbados Labour Party, be put in a position again where they will be waiting until the end. The people of Barbados spoke overwhelmingly, sir, that 30 seats were given not once, but twice, because of the fact that they recognized that they had a government that kept Barbados waiting to the end, while the people that were elected to serve chose to serve themselves, fatten their bellies and their purses, and to neglect those who sent them to Parliament, not under our watch, Mr. Speaker. I could go on until midnight, but you wouldn't let me. So, sir, I pause to tell you, thank you, sir, for your indulgence. I am obliged.
Well said. Honourable member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's starting to feel as though this is the beginning of the session and not the end, and it is a good feeling indeed. I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to congratulate the Honourable Prime Minister, member for St. Michael Northeast, on what I think unanimously has been a very balanced budget. When we look at the lead up to the presentation of this budget, all of the commentary seemed to suggest that there were concerns as to what was going to be in this budget. And it was reasonable for the public to question what was going to be in it, simply because we had been, as a government, trying to grapple with all of the challenges that have confronted us as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've spent more than I think we ever anticipated we were going to have to spend to be able to keep people alive, to ensure that there was stability in this country, not only economic stability, but also to ensure that there was social stability maintained. And as a consequence, we ended up having to do a number of programs that at the end of the day, in normal circumstances, coming into an IMF program, we would have been told we can't hire these people, we can't put people on contract work, we can't have people in MTW coming in to clean the roads, we can't ensure that we bring on community health workers to be able to make sure that during one of our most difficult times that our elderly people were being cared for within their homes. Equally, we would have been told that we couldn't engage in an activity which would ensure the beautification of the entire country. And I want to say tonight that Barbados has never looked as clean and as beautiful as it does today. And kudos to those workers from across the length and breadth of Barbados who rose to the occasion in those difficult times to be able to help us to stay the course and to ensure that Barbados remains stable. But as people tried to understand what coming in this budget, they tried to understand how could we be spending all of this money over the course of the last 2 years and not come in a budget and squeeze a little bit more out of the people of this country, because the money has to come back from somewhere. You can't spend all this money and not know exactly how you are going to pay for it. And the good thing about this administration is that we have taught the country through not only what we intended to spend, but we also taught the country through where we were trying to get the funds from in order to be able to stabilize the economy and to maintain the society as we would want to have it. But what is interesting is that perhaps the biggest bugbear for many Barbadians was the cost of fuel. And in one fell swoop, we took the position that we had to make sure in this budget that if we can't control the price from which we are purchasing, but we can certainly control the price from which we take from the consumers in Barbados. And that, I believe, speaks to the fact that when we hear the talk about a balanced budget, a budget that is for all Barbadians, if you start with just that basic principle of what will touch almost every single Barbadian across this country, people understand that being able to go to the petrol station and now find themselves, as of it is midnight tonight, that they are now in a position where we have capped the dollar amount of the VAT payable on petrol to 47 cents per litre from the 61 cents effective tonight for the next 6 months. That speaks volumes in terms of this administration's commitment to the people, that we were listening. And it is not only the Honourable Prime Minister that I believe requires our congratulations in this chamber, but the entire economic team. Because at the end of the day, while the Prime Minister is brilliant, and we all know this, and the entire world knows this as well, you still have to take the advice from all of the persons who also interact as well with ordinary Barbadians, the Cabinet of Barbados, the economic team. And these are the persons who influence and advise as to how do we maintain that balance in an environment where we have to hold strain on one hand, but we still have to ease the pressure on ordinary Barbadians across this country. And sir, as I listen to the reaction of Barbadians, I mean, if you talk about the taxi operators, people will always want you to go further. They will always want more. You give them an inch, they want to take a mile. But the truth of the matter is that what we have done with that one initiative is send a very strong message that we have listened and that we understand that if your input costs are so high and so prohibitive, you're going to find a way to pass it on to the consumer. You're going to be frustrated. It is going to have an impact on how you deal with your family, how you deal with people around you, how you deal with even on the road, how you engage with people as you're driving on the road, because you are frustrated by the very fact that you're not taking home the amount of money that you believe that you should to be able to feed your family. Now, we also went a step further because we understand that if we allow containers that the suppliers have purchased to come with foodstuff to come into this country, and we don't take some kind of step to be able to ensure that the costs of the goods coming out of the port remain reasonable to our consumers, that we then add another layer of burden on an already burdened people. So what does the Honourable Prime Minister and the economic team do? They seek in this particular budget to be able to put a cap on the amounts that these persons pay to bring this food into Barbados, because we all understand the difficulty of getting containers to Barbados. We all understand the difficulty in shipping, because every day across ministries, you are frustrated in relation to bringing in equipment or in bringing in supplies because of the difficulty and the cost in accessing the very basic things such as a container. So we understand that if we do not ease the pressure off of the very people who are the middlemen in terms of supplying to our constituents, to our ordinary Barbadians, to make sure that people in the hotel sector are able to get things on their table, that we will find ourselves in a situation where, again, we will have that instability existing in the country. And just again, by that measure, we have demonstrated in this budget that we have not only listened, but that we also care sufficiently to level the playing field so that that cost is not passed on to the consumer. We also went a step further because I think the speaker after speaker today has spoken to the issue of their constituents and how the impact in relation to the zero rating of the VAT for personal and critical care items will impact their constituents. And the truth of the matter is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I mean, for me, this is perhaps one of the better provisions within this budget. And why? All of us know at the peak of the pandemic, the impact that we have all felt as a result of constituents not being able to make ends meet. We heard all of the stories that came from people having to struggle to be able, because they were laid off, the tourism industry was impacted, and as a consequence, they had to basically try to make ends meet. I know the stories of people, choosing whether to change the elderly person 2-3 times a day or to change them once. I know the stories of the babies who you're hoping that the baby don't get sick and dirty up the pamper, because you don't want to have to change it 2 or 3 times because of the cost of being able to purchase these items for your children. Mr. Speaker, colleagues are nodding, and they nod because this is our daily reality as representatives of people across Barbados. And we understand that even despite of all that we have encountered over the past few years, that we could not come with a budget that did not allow for persons to be able to make better choices for themselves and also for their families as well. I would love to see that, we could get to a point, even in relation to the other measure, which hits on us now for the first time, being able to single out diabetes in this country, a chronic non-communicable disease. We've singled it out. We could have singled out 10 other chronic non-communicable diseases, but we have singled out diabetes because we've all grown up hearing that we are the the amputee capital of the region, and in some cases of the world. All of us know people who end up with diabetes because of and I'm guilty of it too, because I love a snow cone when the opportunity presents itself, but I do it in moderation. All of us know we like to taste the tamarind balls, and we like to taste the things that we've traditionally grown up with. But what this budget is also signaling is that the time has come for us to look critically at what it is that we have to do to stop the expenditure in the way that we have been outlaying these costs in relation to taking care of the sick people in this country. If nothing else that this pandemic has taught us, it is that when this pandemic is over, that we still have to deal with the issues at the hospital in relation to people getting appointments. We still have to deal with the issue of the surgeries being put back. We still have to deal, as we heard earlier from one of the members, that you have situations where people have put off their care over the course of the past few years simply because, not they didn't want to go to the hospital, but simply because they couldn't go because of COVID. Because they're more feared catching COVID than they feared the word being told to them that they may have had some chronic disease. That is what we now have to deal with. And the fact that this budget has taken into account for the very first time that we have to be able to single out what is our greatest bugbear in this country and be able to wrestle that to the ground by making sure that people who are suffering with chronic illness such as diabetes, that they have access to the basic items that they require in order to manage their care. But it goes further, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because some of the same items that are on the list, things like the Ensure and the Pediasure and all of those things, are also relative to cancer patients as well. And I have spoken in the estimates debates previously when I came back from my own illness, and I have spoken to the fact that we have to make the things that are necessary for persons who are suffering with any illness affordable. The truth of the matter is that when you look at the persons who undergo cancer, they have to pay for things like Ensure. They have to buy things like Biotine toothpaste in order to make sure that the ulcers in their mouth doesn't irritate their mouth more. They have to make sure that they have cuticle creams to make sure that when the fingers start to be affected by the chemotherapy, that they're able to make sure that they don't drop out. These things come at a cost, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I believe that in the same way that we have started in this estimates debate to be able to look at things that can impact on persons who are suffering with diabetes, it begins the conversation as to the things that we have to do with all of the other chronic non-communicable diseases. And I know that the cancer plan is in motion, but I want the cancer plan to come a little faster. Because every day I encounter people who not only speak of their experiences within the hospital, but they also speak to the simple things in relation to the cost of caring for themselves. And people make decisions not because they can't do any better, but they make decisions as to whether they're going to continue with the treatment, if they're going to continue with expensive treatment and expensive care, or whether they're going to just, give up. And many, too often, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are giving up because they cannot afford to be able to sustain themselves on a regular basis to afford these basic necessities to keep them alive. I believe that this is the beginning of what we must now drill down even more. And I don't think it has to wait until the next budget for us to start to look at how do we ease the pressure off of the people who are chronically ill, the people who require the necessary assistance and the support in order to be able to benefit from these measures. Even if you think of the fact that this measure leads in now to the whole issue of what we eat and how we eat. We've addressed it in this budget as well, because the wider message of these budgetary proposals is also sending a message that we are tackling chronic non-communicable diseases, but we also want Barbadians to eat healthier. And if we want you to eat healthier, we have to put the mechanisms in place to enable and to empower you, not only in your households, but also if you are interested in entrepreneurial activity as a farmer, we got to make sure that you are put in a position to want to be able to grow what you eat and eat what you grow. And if we don't connect the two in terms of attacking the chronic diseases and also sending the message that we want to make sure that our population lives longer but lives healthier, then we would be remiss of our obligation to the people of this country. I recall a time when the Honourable Prime Minister used to speak about her habits, her bad habits, smoking. And she was able to, again, come clean to the country, bare all, and indicate, look, I had to take a little break. These are the things as leaders that we have to stand up and send a message, whether through budgetary policies or whether we do it in other forums. But we have to lead by example, because the cost to the population, the cost to the country is so grave that we are losing a number of people that ordinarily we do not really need to. And I believe that this is just the beginning of us being able to see that shift in the mindset. Is going to require, obviously, a lot of public education. I recall my own battles in the Ministry of Education as well, not so long ago, where trying to change the behavior was an uphill struggle. And why was it an uphill struggle? Because we are all accustomed to the vendors outside of the schools and even inside of the schools selling sugary products to our students, teachers engaging in the same behaviors to raise funds for the PTAs and to raise funds for whatever. And at the end of the day, we are telling them on a Wednesday, one day of the week, drink water. And we're telling them one day of the week on a Friday, drink juice or eat fruits. We have to start to realize that we are sending mixed messages. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, the Honourable Minister of Education and I have spoken, and I have shared my view that going back into school in this pandemic, coming out of this pandemic, gave us the opportunity to wrestle to the ground for the very first time what I consider to be the bad practices that have built up with these types of canteens and activities within the school environment. It is not to say that you eliminate everything that is sugary from your diet and from the school plant, but you have to start somewhere. And it can't be just one day a week. And if it is that we have ended up in a situation where we've had none of these things within the school environment because the children have not been there for the last almost 2 years, then this is a perfect opportunity for us to change the behavior. Because before we start to get back into the fundraising exercise, this is the time for us to be able to set the tone that you drink water 5-7 days of the week. You substitute the fruits as part of the diet instead of the sugary snacks and the popcorn and the sweetened beverages and all of those things. But it has to start not just with a recognition in a budgetary proposal that we must now move in the direction of targeting diabetes, but it is going to have to be a holistic approach to dealing with this issue. We started with the National Nutrition Policy. I know the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Ministry of Education, I hope in this coming year, will be able to unleash that national nutrition policy, which will address some of these same things. But we got to talk straight to our constituents too, who are vendors. Because it is okay to say you don't want the children to eat these things, but then you got a problem with the fact that some of your constituents are the same vendors selling the things to the students. So we got to make up our minds. Because when we talk about mixed messages, sometimes even as leaders, we are guilty of sending the mixed messages, and then we wonder why it is that there is behavior of protests, as one member spoke to it earlier, coming from within the society. It is because sometimes our morning words and our evening words do not add up. Because we say in one breath, we don't want you to do X, but then when you are in your quarters, you do something different. And our young people see it and they relate to it, and they protest in their own way, not because they don't want to agree with what you're doing, but because you are not setting the example in the schools, in the churches, in the home environment, in the wider society, that says to them, we should follow what you are doing because you are doing it in the best interest. The issue of connecting as well the food that we eat and making sure that we can now transition ordinary Barbadians, farmers, into a situation where they see themselves now with the reduction in the payment of water to the 180, that they can now see themselves as having an opportunity to be able to produce more, to be able to export more, to be able now to get involved in an activity which, with all of the other things that we've been doing through the Ministry of Agriculture, they now have an opportunity to participate and to be part of the pie across the land lease programs, because that is what this administration has been focusing on. And we have, you know, sometimes we forget to talk about these things because we tend to talk in the present. And we forget to take people on the journey as to how we have been connecting the dots. Because we haven't just gotten to this point where we can look at the reduction of the cost of water alone just overnight. We've gotten to this point because we have looked at how do we energize an agricultural sector that, even as I sat in the opposition at the time, that I was, in a sense, berated in this chamber over and over because we could not see from the then Democratic Labour Party administration the opportunities which need to be presented to the people of this country in agriculture. Everybody talked a lot about agriculture. They talked about how we would bring, we would do other things in relation to sugar and the sugar cane. They talked about taking the fields out of production and doing other things with them, but they didn't do it. They talked about empowering farmers, but it took the Barbados Labour Party administration to come to office, to start the process and the conversation with people, to make it acceptable to be able to go into farming. We have started projects that have given, I think, the momentum to the general population to not only engage in the little kitchen garden so that they can grow what they eat and eat what they grow, but also for people to, who have at school been interested in agriculture, but it was not high priority on the agenda of subjects because we've been too busy trying to get them through the system through primary school to pass a common entrance examination, ignoring the fact that there are some children from the youngest age who have an interest in the ground, who have an interest in growing things and seeing things come to fruition. We forget that there are these opportunities that we must nurture. And I'm glad that between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Agriculture, the opportunities have now presented themselves with all that we're doing in the land lease programs to now allow for the master trainers to go into the schools from the very earliest age, from the nursery level to the tertiary level, to be able to help our young people to see agriculture as an acceptable and viable form of employment in this country. It is not by chance that there will be not only a research facility for agriculture coming on stream thanks to the People's Republic of China, but also that we will also in the near future also find ourselves in a situation where we have specialist schools in agriculture. And the framework is there. I know the Honourable Minister will hit the ground running in relation to that, because we understand that if you are going to transform an economy, you also are going to have to specialize at an earlier age to be able to engender the interest from our young people to go into specific fields. When we did the stats as to how many people were interested in agriculture, how many people in Barbados were actually going into agriculture, it was unbelievable. We are not channeling people in that direction, and that time has now come where we must create the opportunities for people to see this as a viable way of being able to make money to sustain themselves, to sustain their families, and to sustain Barbados. And if nothing else has hit home to us during this pandemic, it has to be that apart from the frontline workers, the nurses and the doctors and the teachers, that our frontline workers also have become the farmers in this country. Because if you ain't got food on your table and you ain't growing nothing to eat, you can starve. And we understood it when we realized how difficult it was to get resources, to get things to come from across the sea because of the cost of the containers. We understood it, and that is why this administration, almost as though the Prime Minister has some crystal ball, understanding that we can't just plan for today, but we have a responsibility to start to plan for tomorrow as well. I have been fortunate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to have been a part of this chamber.
Honourable member, you have 5 more.
Thank you. When the Honourable, the former leader of the Barbados Labour Party, was in this chamber. And the one thing all of us, I believe, recall was his constant lecturing about the need for growth, that we could do nothing unless we got growth. We've spoken to stabilization, we've spoken to growth. We continue as a Labour Party to speak to the fact that we must have growth. But in all of these policies as well, and I know that he must be smiling when he looks down on us right now, we are seeing for the first time the level of transformation that is necessary, whether it is in the renewable energy sector, whether it is in the agricultural sector, whether it is in the things that are about to happen in education reform. We are finally seeing the connecting of the dots within the society, which has been on the tip of, I think, all of our visionary leaders for over the last few decades. You cannot have a stable economy without having the growth and obviously leading eventually to transformation of the economy. That is what the people of Barbados elected us to do. They didn't elect us to come to office and leave them where we found them. They don't expect of us to come to office and complain about the circumstances in which we have found the economy. But rather, we must always be at the forefront of never letting people remain where it is that we have found them. And I believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this budget signals to the people of this country and certainly to the region as well, that we have been listening to the people, that while we have been prepared to spend and to keep things afloat, we have equally been trying our best to make sure that this particular budget is able to hold the people of this country together and to continue to engender in us the confidence that is necessary to continue on this current trajectory. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I again want to commend all of in particular, the junior members who spoke in this debate. I know that road very well, coming into this chamber for the first time, how sometimes you have a little nerves, even for those who are new ministers in this chamber. But what I'm equally proud of, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the fact that they have hit the ground running, and they have not been afraid to put their positions, to make their positions felt, whether it is even, and I totally agree with the Honourable Member for the City, and he knows this well, that all of these policies will only mean something if we are able to implement. And as a country, as a government, all of us in our respective ministries have a responsibility now to not let the ink just dry on the paper, but to figure out how do we, as PM always say, how do we break it down and build it back up? How do we deconstruct it, reconstruct it? And we can only do that if the stakeholders, in particular the public servants, are on the same page with us. Because we set deadlines, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch West does, that sometimes seem unrealistic, it doesn't mean that we don't expect that there may have to be a day or two out in submitting the submissions for comments from a ministry. We get it. We get that things come up. But we act urgently because we understand what is at stake. It isn't to be disrespectful to public servants. It is because we understand what we are trying to do to keep the stability of this country together. So we may seem a little rough sometimes. We may seem a little urgent sometimes. But we are urgent because we represent the people and we understand the pulse of the people. You can't know what is happening if you don't leave your office and get on the ground. And many of us are on the ground and we understand the hurt, we understand the suffering. So my one appeal, Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I sit, is that and the Prime Minister has heard me say this repeatedly, that I believe that many of these policies will require us to also ensure that we have the reform within our public sector in a way that allows us to make sure that we have the adequate staffing, that if we have to make readjustments quickly, because the issue is quickly, readjustments can be made, but they often take too long, okay? And by then, Rome has already burnt down. And we need to get to a position where those bureaucratic delays and all of the red tape, that we are able to break it down, because what we have here, I believe, is completely transformational and gives us the opportunity to be able to hit the ground running for the future. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Joseph.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't plan on detaining yourself or this chamber for overly long. The public of Barbados has been treated to what some are now saying amounts to 3 weeks of fine, unsurpassed speeches by members of this House of Assembly. And as I suppose one of the senior parliamentarians, I too would like to commend all of the newer parliamentarians for acquitting themselves so well in these difficult times and at the start of their political careers. I have a feeling that while it has been a good thing to have the annual financial debates coming so soon after an election, it has probably meant that all of the new candidates have been thrown in at the deep end. And you normally do, Mrs. Deputy Speaker, have some time to warm up and to practice on all kinds of other smaller matters, and before you get thrown in to deal with these very weighty issues, some of which I know can be a little bit difficult to grapple with. Let me again thank the good people of St. Joseph. I thanked them before on our first debate since we won the government, but I'd like to do it again because some people said they didn't hear it last time. I am extremely honored to have been elected once more to represent the constituency of St. Joseph. And I am gratified by what I consider to be a very solid vote of confidence in myself and in our team. And that vote of confidence is one which I think feeds our enthusiasm as we try to grapple with the issues that are ahead. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Public Finance Management Act of 2019 in section 21(4) provides that the annual budget shall be laid in the House of Assembly no later than March 15th of the year prior to which it relates. And so our Public Finance Management Act sets the legislative context for what we are about. But I'll remember my first ever budget speech given in the year 2003. And as a new parliamentarian, I had to keep reminding myself that no matter how difficult this whole process is, sometimes if you reduce it to simple terms, it becomes a little bit easier to comprehend. And I know what it is like for my household. My father provided the income, but my mother managed the budget. And there are parallels, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to be drawn between that exercise that every single one of us in every single one of our households as children and our households now as adults. There are parallels between what we do on a daily basis and what we have been doing in the context of a national budget for Barbados. And just as in our households, we have to, as some people say, cut and contrive, we have to do it here. There are some people who would want to be able to buy a new car, a new fridge, a new TV, a new stove, everything all at once. But when the rubber hits the road, when the reality of how much dollars are available faces you, you begin to recognize the importance of making not just difficult choices, but the right choices. And so what we've been doing over the last 3 days and perhaps over the last 3 weeks is really a lesson in what a famous American jurist, Roscoe Pound, and you'll permit me to quote him, what Roscoe Pound would have called building an efficient structure of society with the satisfaction of the maximum of wants with a minimum of friction and waste. Let me repeat that. Building an efficient structure of a society with the satisfaction of the maximum of wants. So that's what we're here about. We want to maximize how we satisfy all of the wants of my constituents and yours, the wants of the private sector and the public sector, the wants of every interest group. We all have wants. So our job as legislators, as a parliament, as a government, is to see how we can satisfy the maximum of wants with a minimum of friction and waste. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, what has been presented by the Honourable Prime Minister is perhaps the perfect example of how a government should set about maximizing, satisfying the wants of our people while making sure that the friction that would normally occur between competing desires. So, for example, I want roads, but the member for the city wants houses. And the Minister of Agriculture wants to keep land in agriculture, while the Minister of Housing has, and we know the number now, 10,000 houses to build. Those things are bound to generate friction, competing desires. And somewhere along the line, sir, there's bound to be some fallout, there's bound to be some kind of waste. But this budget demonstrates clearly to every Barbadian who has taken the trouble not even to listen to the whole thing, but just to follow some of the summaries to get an understanding of how we begin to achieve that. Mr. Speaker, I have from time to time, and those who are close to me would probably say that I now do it ad nauseum, reflect on the particular Greek fable of a man, a king called Sisyphus. And for those of you who have heard it before, and some of you who have studied the fables, you will know that Sisyphus was punished by the gods and forced to roll a huge stone up a hill. And he would get to the top of the hill every day. But during the night, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the gods would roll the stone back down again. And so Sisyphus the next day had to begin this laborious exercise once more. And so the story of Sisyphus really, in many respects, talks about what we as a government have been having to deal with from the time we won the election in 2018. In many ways, Mr. Speaker, on an almost daily basis, we succeed in rolling that huge stone up the proverbial hill only for something to come along and set us back to where we were at the beginning of that episode. And you can list them, Mr. Speaker. We came to government with a wrecked economy, and we put it on a solid footing. But no sooner did we grapple with that particular issue, we then had to deal with COVID. And in many respects, we seem to be rolling that stone up a hill almost every hour now. And then we had the ashfall, then we had the freak storm, then we had the rail storm, and now we have the war in Ukraine. And every single one of these incidents has served, Mr. Speaker, to deal what the ancients would have called a dolorous blow, not just to our economy, but also to the psyche of Barbadians. I feel that some days the Prime Minister wakes up or goes to bed feeling punch drunk, simply because we constantly seem to be battered by one difficulty or another. One difficulty or another. But what gives me immense pride, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps it is why this budget, coming on the heels of an election that gave us 30 seats again, is saying so much. Because the people of this country gave us the overwhelming mandate once more. And we're not waiting 6 or 8 or 9 months to come to the country and say, well, we made these speeches in the elections, and now this is how we can manage the issues. Within 2 months of the election, we are here addressing the fundamentals of not just the Barbadian economy, but the Barbadian society. A society, sir, which is demanding a whole host of things, not because Barbadians are in any way greedy or avaricious, but because for so long we were deprived of the benefits, some of the simple benefits of a civilized society. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the worst 2 days in recent times for me was yesterday and the day before. And those were not 2 bad days because of any huge tragedy or because of any personal difficulty. There were 2 really bad days, Mr. Speaker, because on each of those days I fielded dozens of calls from my constituents with a complaint that I had not heard in many, many months: the water off. Now, Mr. Speaker, there was a time in this chamber when they talked about water being off. I was the burning deck. The boy didn't know what he was talking about. Unfortunately, now I have some friends in the north and some friends in the south who have begun to understand what being deprived of water in a modern Barbados means. And there were bad days for me, Mr. Speaker, because together with the Prime Minister, we assured the people of St. Joseph that the water problems were fixed. And we stand by that. But the problem, as I understand it from the technical people at Waterworks, is that we had several power outages. So it wasn't a shortage of water, but we had power outages which triggered electrical problems, which then meant we had pipe pumping challenges. Mr. Speaker, it grieved me, having in the lead up to the last election given my constituents the assurance that the water problem was solved, to have to field those calls for people who were self-employed, people who couldn't make juices to sell in their business, people who couldn't cook, all of these things that we take for granted because the water was off. Now, how do we get to this, Mr. Speaker, and why is this relevant? It is relevant, Mr. Speaker, because of the very issue of Sisyphus. The problem was not necessarily with the Water Authority, but the problem was with our energy supply. So we are in a matrix where just about everything is connected. And our job as legislators is to try to make sure that they remain connected and functioning at all times. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, if I say Mr. Speaker, be hereinafter declare that I mean you, sir. So we have a budget. We have a budget speech very ably delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister. And to a man and woman supported in absolute terms by every member of this chamber, save one, the Speaker himself. But this is not an exercise, Mr. Speaker, in praising ourselves and patting ourselves on the back. This is about a solemn commitment that we're giving to Barbados as to how we will deal with their affairs for the next 12 months. Let me quote for this chamber something that I came across. And when I come across these things, I write them down and save them for future reference. The opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. The character of our nation isn't reflected by the privileged, but by how we treat the poor, the disfavored, and the condemned. So, the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's justice. Because when our good friend who represents the Zone 1 district in the area of the Ivy calls for the shoring of the bell, it is about bringing justice to the people of that district. And it's not justice in the courts, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is a form of enfranchisement that they have long been deprived of. We are about to launch the new Constitution Reform Commission. And the commissioners are being asked to help us to craft a whole new constitution for Barbados. And in considering this issue, they're going to have to consider something called third and fourth generation rights. Now, we all know about the right to life and the right to liberty and all those kinds of things. Those are the things that are very common, the right not to be deprived of your property. But over the last 100 years, legal thinking has started to ask the question whether these are all. And they've begun to address their minds to such things as a right to water, a right to sewage, a right to a healthy environment. Things that our constitutions never contemplated before. So when we talk about the opposite of poverty being justice, Mr. Speaker, it is about how, using the tools at our disposal, we are going to be able to bring justice of some kind to my constituents and to yours. And solving the water problem, Mr. Speaker, was a way of bringing justice to my constituents. And solving the sewage problem in the Bell is a way of bringing justice to those. And the water problem in St. Lucie, and the housing issue in the Pine. Because, sir, believe it or not, that is what we are here for. If any of you have ever watched, Evita. If you've ever watched Evita, the underpinning of that musical was about a huge underclass of people who were called descamisados. I worry that I'm beginning to sound a little radical. I might start to worry my colleagues. Descamisados, meaning the shirtless ones, Mr. Speaker. Meaning the shirtless ones. Because in every single constituency of Barbados, we all have people to represent who are crying out for some kind of justice and who can be considered to be our equivalent of those shirtless ones. And if we feel that that is just an enclave of 20 or 30 houses here or there, sir, COVID meant that 32,000 people claimed on the unemployment fund. COVID meant that businesses' grandmother, I hope they can capture that in the Hansard, had to shut down. Businesses where you get a COVID case and they got to shut down for a week or two, which means a week or two without earning and can't pay wages. And that, Mr. Speaker, all of these things that have hit us so hard as a country in the last 2 years has resulted in an increased number of shirtless ones, people who need our support and our help. So, Mr. Speaker, this budget has been described as a shield. But I choose to think of it in a little bit more aggressive a tone than that, sir. Because, and the lawyers would know, we talk about equity being a shield and not a sword. But in many respects, sir, I see what has been documented here as being far more impactful than a shield. You see, a shield is just something that protects you. A shield is a defense implement. It defends you, and that's fine. But in this commitment, in this budget, Mr. Speaker, that from the 1st of April 2023, the first $300,000 of property value will be free of tax. That is, to me, sir, that is a lot more than a shield, sir. That is now an offensive instrument which is intended to empower and to liberate Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, I represent a rural constituency. My constituency includes piece of St. Andrew, piece of St. Thomas, piece of St. George, and piece of St. John. And of course, all of St. Joseph. And I invite you any day as you drive through my beautiful tree-lined rocky avenues. We're fixing them. To look at the housing stock, sir. The housing stock of proud Barbadians, but I would bet you that less than 10% of the houses in my constituency, less than 10%, sir, would easily get past that threshold of $300,000. So, Mr. Speaker, the vast majority, and it's $300,000 as at 1st April 2023, 1st April 2026, $400,000. Mr. Speaker, the vast majority of my home-owning constituents will be free of any land tax. Free of any land tax. To me, sir, that isn't just a shield. Somebody who lays supine and puts something to protect themselves from blows. Yeah, that, sir, is a strong, aggressive tool to help to free up Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, today I got a call from a man in St. Philip who said to me, look, a gentleman needs to get bail for a young man, and he wants to put up his property. But problem is, the property had land tax owing on it. It wasn't a huge property, but it had land tax owing on it. So it couldn't be used. Now, I hope that my constituents never have to put their properties up for bail. But the point is, sir, the incidence of land tax affects us all in many, many, many ways. And so I commend the Prime Minister. We talked about it during the elections. And people say, man, that's just a political gimmick. You don't mean none of that. Wait and see what happens. Don't believe her when she says it. Don't believe any of them when they say it. but it is pronounced here as a reality, sir. This Prime Minister is more than a shield for my constituents. This will help to keep dollars in their pockets and children at school. But the other form of justice has to do with, and we've been ribbing the Minister of Housing about these 10,000 houses. I want a lot of them. I want a lot of them. Because all across my constituency, there's housing stock that needs replacing. And Hurricane Elsa should have shaken up a lot of us as parliamentarians and a lot of Barbadians. We've not had these challenges for many years, and a lot of our housing stock, Prime Minister, regrettably, isn't just about refurbishing. Some of it simply has to be replaced. And some of our constituents are in no position to do it for themselves. But I want to see, as part of that 10,000 houses program, a greater emphasis, Madam Prime Minister and the Minister responsible for housing, on a return to our sites and services program. And, you know, I believe that we empower Barbadians when we give them an opportunity to help themselves. And I am a firm believer in a generous proportion of our house lots being made available to people for rent so that they can build their own houses and over time buy. This is not alien to the Barbados Labour Party. This is not a new policy. In fact, with the support of the Prime Minister and the last Minister of Housing, I was able to get some service lots at Ginger Works. And Madam Prime Minister, the people of St. Joseph, they're clamoring for more and more service lots. And I'm satisfied that as we provide more opportunities like that for individuals, the money that they would have, notwithstanding the initiative that we have committed to, the subvention to first-time homeowners under 35, there are a lot of individuals who, Madam Prime Minister, will value the opportunity to rent a house spot and to use whatever resources they have to be able to see a house go up for themselves and their families. So I want to say to the Minister that I would look forward to a large number of these opportunities coming at Ginger Works in my constituency.
Honourable Member, you have 5 more minutes, sir.
Well, let me wrap up by looking then, sir, at another side of things. You see, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we often, as we consider how we deal with the country, we often focus on the hard stuff, on the material stuff. So we talk about the taxation, we talk about changing laws and so on. But there are sometimes, Mr. Speaker, when you simply have to stand back and ask yourself the question, can we do what we do currently any better? And, Mr. Speaker, that will bring me quite squarely to closing comments on the matter of the 3 commissions that this government has committed to establish. One is the Constitution Reform Commission, the other is the Commission on Parliamentary Reform, and the third is the Commission on the Community for the Differently Able. Mr. Speaker, we go about our daily lives not focusing on any of these issues until we have to grapple with them ourselves. As a government, we are committed, though, to ensuring that whether they are in our face or whether they're perhaps a little bit off to the side, as we tend to push things that we're not so excited about, Mr. Speaker, it is our job as an administration to bring all of these issues to the fore and to deal with them. The Commission on the Community of the Differently Able is one, Mr. Speaker, that speaks to a society that understands that each Barbadian has a role to play. It is about a government, Mr. Speaker, that recognizes, and it's been our mantra for so long, that no one will be left behind. And therefore, that commission is especially dear to my heart. But also the Commission on Parliamentary Reform. It is an uncomfortable subject for many of us, because this is how we have always done it. We know nothing else. But the truth is, on a daily basis, we begin to see some of the cracks that appear in our system of governance, and we have to ask ourselves whether this will take us forward. And allied to that, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the Constitution Reform Commission. And the Prime Minister was only able to mention it en passant in her address to the Chamber, but I want to reiterate our commitment to launching a Constitution Reform Commission very, very early in this term. I can say to the public of Barbados that the draft Constitution is ready and will shortly be rolled out for their consideration. And we propose that Mr. Justice retired Christopher Blackman should be the chair of this commission. And I can think of very few people as eminent or as erudite as Mr. Justice Blackman to grapple with this issue for us. And I want to encourage all Barbadians to seize every opportunity to weigh in on this constitutional discussion as it is brought to the people of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, we've been elected for another term. And I want to urge that while we have won our seats with aplomb, and while we are enthusiastic about our resounding victory, we always bear in mind that to whom much is given, of him much is expected. And we are starting a new political term. We've already had to grapple with some serious issues. We didn't anticipate a war in Ukraine, but here it is. A lot is going to be asked of us. But I know, Mr. Speaker, that standing together, shoulder to shoulder, this administration can once again deliver for the people of Barbados. And this budget, which I commend to you and to this entire House, is but the first step in grappling with these issues. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Prime Minister, a member for St. Michael Northeast. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to start my remarks as I close this debate by truly saying how proud I am to lead this party and to have the complement of persons that I have here today. Anyone looking on who did not know or had not heard what transpired in the earlier parts of this year that resulted in the confidence that Barbadians gave in the persons who now occupy this chamber would have understood why Barbadians acted in the manner in which they did. I've just come back from CARICOM Heads of Government conference, as you know, in Belize last week. And throughout the entire week, my colleagues asked me, but how did you manage to do this? And I said, well, we didn't do anything special. We just delivered for the people, but above all else, I had a team that remained connected and that commanded the respect of the people of this country. Anyone who doubted it, in listening to the debate over the course of the last 3 days, would understand how serious this government is about delivering for the people of this country at these difficult and uncertain times. And I want, with your permission, sir, to commend each and every member of this House of Assembly for performing in a manner that has brought honor, not just to our government, but to the people of this nation, that we have people equal to the task of one, recognizing that we must stay focused, stay humble, stay focused, stay humble, but two, that we are duty bound to grow this economy, because it is only when the pie gets bigger that we're in a position to fairly distribute what has to be distributed. And that even as we do that, that we protect and shield those who for no reason of their own cannot do so for themselves. I've listened to the commentary of those across the nation, and it is fair to say that more than 90% of those who have spoken have issued the one adjective that I consider to be a measurement that we have done our duty. And what did Barbadians say, almost to a man and a woman? That the budget was fair. That's the one word that you've heard from almost every quarter, that the budget was fair. They knew that now was not a time for giveaways. Bajans have an innate sense, and they appreciate that for any government to come and try to give away in this environment would be to put the country on a calamitous path. They knew that there are some who cannot carry on their own, and that's largely because they've not yet made the journey that would allow them to be able to carry their families and themselves where they want to go. But they know that there are those of us who recognize that even though they can't make that journey yet, that we're going to do everything in our power to allow them to be able to leave that train station and make that journey like others who have made it before, particularly in the last 70 to 80 years of this nation. And Mr. Speaker, at the same time, we knew that we have a duty to open the pathways and to create the propulsion, for want of a better phrase, the opportunities for people to be able to move forward again. Now, in a very real sense, this economy is in a twilight zone. It's in a twilight zone. It's between the worst parts of the pandemic, but optimistic as we had the test match today, and you only needed to go to Fontebelle to see what potentially the future can continue to hold for us, and people beginning to step out and looking to see, wait, we could step out in truth, or the rain will fall. We could step out in truth, or the ash can fall. Because when we started to open up after Alpha, the first weekend the ash came. But I want to say and to talk to those who are responsible for helping us get out of this twilight zone. I'm conscious that people are being cautious. But let us be careful that in exercising too much caution, that we don't undermine the very brand that we have. There are those restaurants that are still regrettably not up to fully staffed complements. And what has happened is that you may have one or two people then servicing 6 and 7 tables. And therefore the quality of service for which we had become known, and which was not yet at its zenith, is not yet being replicated. And my deepest fear as Prime Minister of this nation is that if we don't start to ramp up quickly, collectively, not just the public sector, not just employers, not just labor, but all of us, if we don't get up fast and seize the moment, the dog-eat-dog world that is out there will take away our business from us without us realizing it. And I therefore want to spend tonight, I'm going to answer a few questions and a few issues that have been raised, but I want to focus tonight on the fact that what is required of us all is a sea change in how we deliver service in this country. How we as a government deliver service, how the public servants deliver service, and you heard me speak about the bugbears at the end of my speech day before yesterday, but how the private sector delivers service, how the third sector delivers service, how the churches command the respect of their congregation, how the groups, community groups and youth groups are so responsive to be able to cause others to want to join them. And I use this across the board because nobody owes us a living. Nobody owes us a living. And we told the world that in no uncertain terms when we also declared that we were prepared to go to the ultimate form of sovereignty in the declaration of a parliamentary republic. There is no mother or father's house to go back to. This is it. And we have now to be able to hold each other up, but to remind each other of what is required of us. And that is why the danger of being in a twilight zone is that you can fall back into darkness instead of going forward into light. The time has come for us as a nation to choose. And I believe that the conversations that we must have are no different from those which a family has. I've always felt so. And that is why I've tried to use simple language always, not because I don't have the capacity for vocabulary that can speak at a different register, but because I know that we will only be as successful as we can be if we carry everybody along as far as possible with us. And this, my friends, Mr. Speaker, is a challenge that faces us now. I am satisfied that people recognize that Barbados stands for something. And this is not about Rhiannon, it's not about me, or it's not about any individual. It's not about Cigarfield Sobers, it's not about any individual. It's about the collective spirit of this country. When people ask me, and I keep making the point, that what was it that was special about Rihanna? For her to choose to see everybody is not unique to her. It's what she was nurtured to do as being a Barbadian. We teach everybody to see everybody and to hear everybody and to feel everybody. That's why, remember for St. James Central may remember this more than most. That's why the phrase Kadir is so unique. Kadir is as Bajan as they come because it reflects that sense of empathy. And this country translates what is a battle for social justice as that sense of empathy. Now I start here today, sir, because I'm aware that there are some people who are a little uncomfortable and who have chosen to describe the pandemic contribution levy as inappropriate, as a slap, as retroactive. Let me deal with it, sir, in very calm and measured tones. This is a levy, first and foremost. It's not a tax, it is a levy. My language is very, very clear. Secondly, it starts in July. There's nothing retroactive about the levy, sir. The base which it refers to, it is not an income tax or corporation tax. It is a pandemic contribution levy that will be governed by its own legislative instrument, which the Attorney General, the Honourable Attorney General, shall help us bring to this Honourable Chamber. It chooses the only measurement that it can choose: the pandemic. Now, when does the pandemic start? And when have we chosen to end it? I could leave it open-ended. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I could really leave it open-ended and let it go into another year instead of being a one-off tax. But the government does not want to increase the cost of doing business. And the government believes that the tax measures that we have are sufficient once growth comes back to finance the activities of this government. But what we need help with is getting through this year, which is still a pandemic year, for which we have chosen not to recover any funds, but to get through this year because we feel that the double-digit growth could be possible. Now, before the war, I would have said would be possible. With the war, it's too uncertain. And I never went, I am not a gypsy, I am not a fortune teller, I cannot read fortunes, nor palms, and I don't pretend to be able to. Thank you, sir. But what I do know is that we are still in the pandemic, but because we felt that we wanted to be reasonable, that we would do a one-off tax instead of increasing the annual tax take, a one-off levy, instead of increasing the annual tax take, which would then affect the cost of business and would affect the competitiveness of this economy and of the enterprises in this economy. And therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we chose what we believe to be a measured measure. And why? Let's just take one of the 5 groups. And we didn't do it across the board because we were conscious that many could not contribute to the levy because many had no money. If you have a 90% reduction in your tourists, tell me which hotel is going to be able to afford to do anything. Or the firms that supply the hotels that all of a sudden had no business for almost 2 years, as they would have had before. But let me take what the governor of the central bank sent me tonight, because it's important that we understand that when I speak, as I just did, about us having a common approach and a common goal, and us sharing as a nation and feeling the pain of one another, seeing one another, hearing one another, at a time when 32,000 Barbadians lost their jobs and were forced to claim national insurance, unemployment benefit. And mercifully, this country was in a position to respond to them. And mercifully, even more, this government, because of what we did to stabilize the macroeconomic fundamentals of this country in the first 18 months of office, was equally in a position to respond to the needs of the NIS in recapitalization, such that the NIS could prop and keep families alive in this country. You heard me say, how many other countries could have afforded to capitalize their NIS fund by 75 million US just to get through that with the limited base that we have? How many other small countries? And Mr. Speaker, what is that up against? I'm not trying to be difficult. It's Barbadians who have complained about the extent to which the fees of banks have continued to strangle them at the same time that the interest rates have gone to rock bottom. 0.05 is so low that most people in Barbados cannot calculate what 0.05% is. And when I told you, sir, that $1,000 after 20 years would only yield $10.05, and $10,000 after 20 years in the bank would only yield $100 a Grantley and 48 cents. And worse than that, somebody who felt that there's a big up with $100,000 can only get $1,004. But that with the opportunities that this government is seeking to put before you, with bonds for renewable energy, that you should get 80 times what the bank is going to pay you. And if you choose to go and get dividends, yes, it is a risk, but for the most part, with the generation of electricity, it is a good risk to take. You're going to get 240 times what you would get in the bank. Now, this gives Bajans options. I ain't telling nobody to take the money out of the bank, because there's some people who will say, I prefer to keep it there. But there are others who would recognize that in keeping it there, it's not keeping up with the price increases in the country, with the rate of inflation. And that if they want their money to be worth the same thing 5 years or 10 years from now, they may have to find different mechanisms for investment in order to keep that. Now, at the same time that these banks, therefore, have brought their fees to a level which have made Barbadians feel uncomfortable, and brought their interest rates on savings deposits to almost zero, what is the situation with respect to their performance? I am the first to admit that this government had to take the difficult decision to restructure our debt. But when you are getting only 32 cents in the dollar to pay salaries, to buy goods and services across an entire government, to meet all of your obligations, no wonder the government racked up almost $2 billion in arrears, of which $250 million alone, more than what it took for us to support 32,000 Bajans. $250 million between 2015 and 2018 in NIS arrears for the government of Barbados. And this government, in the middle of an IMF program, in the middle of all of the adversities that we've spoken about, we have paid off every single cent. But above all else, we are ensuring that all of the state-owned enterprises and central government remain current with our liabilities to the NIS, because we understand, and I'm going to come to pension reform when I finish dealing with the banks, because we understand that this is the lifeline to our citizens who become elderly and for whom the ability to work is no longer there, but for whom the promise of Social Security was there to enable them to believe that they could live out their years with a level of dignity in this country. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is the performance of the banks? And I'm going to make this a document of the House coming from the Governor of the Central Bank to me tonight. And there are a number of appendices, I believe there are 8 appendices that have to be made documents of the House for the purposes of this speech. And I'll go through all of them before I sit, please. The audited financial information of the banks, and this is for the domestic performance. Net income after tax. 2017, $165.4 million. These are the 5 banks. $165.4 million in the year before we came to office. This is based on the financial year end. And I'm going to give you the calendar year as well for references. In 2018, because of the debt restructuring, according to the financial year end net income after tax, they lost $71.9 million. And yes, but I made the point earlier that if you were charging increased interest rates, higher interest rates, for the risk that the Barbados government posed because of 23 downgrades, you must have known that as I benefit from the higher interest rates, that the risk also is that at some point it might collapse. Because that's the only reason the government was paying you a higher interest rate. If you decide to cross a highway with cars coming down at 120 miles per hour from both ends, every 10 seconds or so, you got to cross both sides of the highway, you know. Now you might get through. And when you get through on the other side, you say, if I'm going to do that, I want to be paid $100,000 for that gargantuan risk that you are putting to my body, to my well-being, to my stability. And if I get to the other side of the road, pay me my $100,000. And you do it, and you get your $100,000, and you're feeling like a Dan Gorgon. And you say, come again. And you keep doing it every year. You do it in 2010, you do it in 2011, you do it in 2012. Oh, there, 2013 comes and the election comes, and everybody tells everything good. So you feel even better, and you do it even doubly now in 2013. Credit Suisse loan. December 2013. Member for St. James Central led it for me. 2014, 2015 come. You want now not 100,000, you want 150,000. Because all of a sudden, the cars come in at 8-second slots, and then 6-second slots. You get $200,000. And 250, you're feeling on top of the world. Look at it. 165.4 now is the profit. And then, boops, the car will be in some wreck here. And you're knocked down on the road. You ain't dead, but you get a broken leg. You're living, but you have a broken leg. You know how I know you have a broken leg and you're living? Because after 2018 was the next profit. 2019, not even 2 years of broken leg. Not even 2 years of losses. Next year, $83.6 million. Net income after taxes. According to the financial year. That's the same year that the government of Barbados had to send home 1,100 people. 1,100 people. That is what spawned the Household Mitigation Unit. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the reality of Barbados. And all who would want to create comparisons to other parts of the world, instead of comparing to other human beings in this country, would do well to remember that no man is an island and no island is the world. And as if they didn't make enough profits after that in 2019. That's why I laugh, you know. In 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, when the uncertainty was at its height, the banking sector made $97.346 million net income after tax, according to the financial year. And I'm going to go back, because if I use the calendar year, it is $101.554 million. And 2019, instead of 83.6 million, according to the calendar year, would have been 72.7. And the losses, according to the calendar year, would have been 30 million, not the 71.9 million. So whether you look at it in calendar year or financial year, when others were losing their jobs, when others were closing their businesses, and I don't grudge that, because they're performing a service, but by the same token, good Lord, have mercy upon us. Good dear, have mercy upon us. And when 2019 and 2020 were over, 83 million in 2019 for the financial year, 97.346 million in 2020, then comes 2021, the year of Alpha, the year of Ashfall, the year of Freak Storm, the year of Hurricane Elsa, the year of Delta, the year of the beginning of Omicron. How many things I called there? About 6 things? Slap, 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 slap. You said it, the Honourable Attorney General, the Sisyphean dilemma. You get the country up, and as soon as you think you're getting round the corner, boom, rock back down the hill. Up again, boom, rock back down the hill. How much they made in 2021? Take a guess. Financial year. 146.43 million. And in the calendar year, 149.867. Now, Mr. Speaker, we are not asking them. We did not come here, look, I bring this. I didn't come here to increase the bank asset tax. I could have come here and increased the bank asset tax. I didn't come here and double the bank asset tax. That would be applicable in each and every year going forward. I didn't come here, Mr. Speaker, because you know what's the best known secret, because we got short memories? What did this Parliament do in 2019 before we went up to Worthing? I stood here on this very spot, and we led before this country in this Parliament a reduction in income taxes and corporation taxes that were second to none since the development of independence in this country. In the middle of an IMF program, we took people earning 2,000 and change and said, no, you are in the twilight zone too, because you don't pay taxes, but you don't get reverse tax credit. And we gave those persons a reverse tax credit of $1,300 when the last government had dropped it to $600 or $650. And they were only giving it to people up to a certain level. But for the first time in the history of this country, and certainly since the indirect taxation of VAT was introduced, ordinary people earning just over $2,000 a month, $25,000 a year, $2,080 or whatever it is a month, $2,082 if you want me to be precise with mental arithmetic. A little too late for that. Mr. Speaker, we took them and said, not only do you not pay taxes, but hold this little $1,300, because we know when you go in the supermarket and when you go and do all these other things, you pay VAT. And we know that you need that to keep body and soul together, or a family together. We then turn around, sir, and we took those persons earning before that $2,084 up to just under $3,000. People earning probably about $2,900 and change, $35,000 a year. And we said, look, pay your taxes. But you know what? At the end of the year, when you finish paying 12 months of taxes, put this in a little envelope, and we give you back every single cent in a compensatory income credit that you paid in taxes. You remember that? Have I come here tonight or Monday to repeal any of those two measures? how do you think then people were able to get through a little better? And then we went on every income category above that, and we reduced the level of taxation, including at the very top. You recall that? And then we took the corporation taxes, 30%. Those in here who had businesses know that you were paying 30% before. And the same banks, and the same insurance companies, and the same telecommunications companies, and the same oil and gas companies, and every other company was a beneficiary of their taxes moving from 30% to a high rate of 5.5%, going down to 1% over $1 million or 1.5 million. I can't remember the exact amount now. So that all of these entities here really paying at the rate of 1%. And when you do the netting out, the effective tax rate is probably what, 2% or whatever? Maybe not even as much as that because of the scale of the profits. So when I hear people tell me that when a government takes up $1 billion in the first year of the pandemic almost, and then in the second year of the pandemic, we're still waiting on the numbers to come up, but it'll probably be 200-300 million shy of that billion. And we take it and we keep this country stable. Stable enough that almost 3,000 people come in on a welcome stamp. Stable enough that people want to ride out the darkest days of the world in this country. Stable enough that their businesses can generate the kind of profit that exceeded anything that they were doing in the pre-pandemic year. And you're going to tell me, Mr. Speaker, that is a slap or that people have a problem with it? Mr. Speaker, on 166 square miles, there is nowhere to run. All of us are in this together. If you hit my leg, my ear and my head can feel it. If you hit my stomach, my toes can feel it. If you pull my hair on the top of my head, every part of my body can feel it. And it's no different from the human condition and the human society. And you know, I realize that I may well not belong to this world anymore because I can't understand it. I can't understand it. Because the morality of the moment demands that which our ancestors taught us. A little with what? A little with content is great gain. And why do I go back to all of these sayings? Because they are tried and tested. I can't pretend at 56 years old to know everything. I have to rely also on the wisdom of those who went before. I have to understand. You know, tonight I got the book, How Britain Underdeveloped the Caribbean from Sir Hilary Beckles. Clearly building upon Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I ask myself, at what point do we stop the embalming of the old colonial order and the inequity that that has generated in our societies? At what point do we see people, hear people, feel people? At what point do we say, you understand that if 105 million, if 15% for 2 years is 105 million for all of those companies, you understand for those 20 or 25 companies what 100% of profits is? You learn it in primary school. If 105 is 15%, what is 1%? Not 1% is 7. So what is 100%? 700 million in profits. I did not say gross revenue. I did not say expenses. I said what? Net income. Did I say before tax? So after they pay the taxes, after they pay the bank asset tax, after they pay the corporation tax, and according to the rest of the world, with the new global minimum corporation tax rate, and that is something we have to engage with and talk to and things with people, that 5.5% to 1% may well become 15% because the world is strangling everybody. I don't want to say bullying, but strangling everybody to come to that minimum, to stop the race to the bottom. Now, all we are saying is that, look, it could have been a lot worse. Give me 15 cents in the dollar of what you have made after you pay your taxes, after you finish everything, and you keep the 85 cents. There are those who say, well, it's gone already, and you have to make adjustments to the financial statements. Well, accountants do that every year. Accountants do that every year. Remember for St. Peter? Adjustments every year. And what worthier purpose can you make an adjustment for than to stabilize the condition of a country that has been the victim of the worst ashfall in 119 years, the worst pandemic in 102 years, and the worst and first hurricane in 66 years. Now, if this was a wicked government, corporation tax would have gone up. Bank asset tax would have gone up. Levies upon everybody would have gone up, starting right down from the bottom. And the 2019 tax breaks would have appeared to be nothing at all, because we would have rolled them back. But we have held ground. And I pray that through the increased productivity, and I'm asking Barbadians now, all of you, we need you to put on the best service possible. We need you to give every minute of every day with passion. Because if you keep your part of the bargain, this government can continue to keep our part of the bargain, to shield you and to lift you up to the higher levels on each occasion. But if we don't do it collectively, then we will have to come back and make adjustments to tax rates. And we will have to come back and bring other people into the net. But we are betting that by taking a moral and fair approach to those who are earning above $75,000 a year, $6,250, 1%, and yes, even the pensioners, and I say to you that, look, $62 is not going to kill people, it's a lot, but the Bible has taught us that whatever little we have, we share. Life is not always going to be easy, but it is in moments like this that our true humanity is expressed, and it is in moments like this that the true character of the nation is defined. And that is why I say that I'm so proud to lead this team, because not a single member on this team opposed what fundamentally is the right thing to do for the right reasons to protect people. And it's a one-off contribution. It's not an attempt to alter the tax rates or to make the country uncompetitive. And if this one-off tax rate leads to increase in prices in anything, then I have to go and ask the Minister of Commerce to go after and do the reviews. Because this is not affecting your cost of business. This is just a contribution from your profits. Just like you're going to church and you do a contribution. If you went to church and you were in certain churches, you would be tithing 10%, but I take a tithe and a half. I take a tithe and a half. And you still get the lion's share. You take 8 tithes and a half. Let's apply our hearts to common sense, please. And let us understand that we live in a world that is a very difficult and challenging world. And that if ever there was a time when we walk the road, do you see a little child running on the road alone? Or do you see the adult, be it an older sister, older brother, a mother, a father, a grandmother, holding the little child's hand? To do what? To protect them. And not even the right hand, because we drive on the right hand side of the road, so it can be the left hand. Because you don't want the child walking in the middle of the road. Give me the left hand. That is who we are. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And if there is a difficulty with it, come and discuss it with us. I met today with the 4 accounting firms. And on the issue of retroactivity, they all accept, having called it all retroactive, they agree. It's not a retroactive tax. The tax becomes applicable when? When does the tax become applicable? The levy, sorry, when does the levy become applicable? July of 2022. And what is the historic base? It can only be the pandemic. Can I choose a period of time outside of a pandemic to cause a pandemic contribution levy? 85 cents in the dollar stays with them. 15 cents comes to support the country that they choose to be domiciled in and from whose citizens they make their profits. We are not touching holding companies. We are not touching their income from other CARICOM territories. We are touching what they make here, contributed to by the blood, sweat, and tears of Barbadians and those living in Barbados. Let us get on with the business of this country, please, and let us do the right thing for the right reasons at this most difficult time in the world. And if we do so, I'm saying to you that I'm counting on growth, and I'm counting on Bajans. I'm counting on Bajans. Don't come to work at 10 o'clock when you're supposed to come to work at 8 o'clock. Don't left at 3 o'clock when you're supposed to work to 4:30. Don't chinks and wait for somebody else to do and be an eye servant. I'm talking straight now. Because whenever done, if you do it, I'm going to be the one that got to come back here and try to correct things. And I don't want to do that. But I know that if we work together in the public and private sector, and we make people feel good, our old lady that come down from St. George, you don't know whether she paid taxi or whether she come on the bus, and you don't know whether it's her last money or not, and she come in to pay something, don't tell her that you're going to lunch and you ain't taking the money. Because you don't know how she can get back down tomorrow. Those who come into welfare, listen to them. Understand the circumstances. The licensing authority have already told the Deputy Prime Minister within the next 4 weeks, I don't want to see another backlog, another card, another licensing card. Not one. And whatever it takes, many hands make light work. It is unacceptable. And if you have to bring on people temporarily to clear the backlog, ma'am, bring them on. I'm going to give you the money to do it because it is wrong and it is unacceptable. I met with the QEH today with the Minister of Health, and he knows that we're going to work towards ensuring that we have the appropriate support staff to be able to help take care of people so that we can ease their burden while waiting at the hospital. These little things matter. And if they don't, well, then you chose the wrong government because they matter to us. They matter to us. And on the issue of pensions now, I want to be clear because, and that's why I told the minister in the Ministry of Finance, the member for Christchurch East Central, do not sleep, do not pass go, do not do anything until you settle the public education program for the public sector pensions. Why? I repeated myself in here 2 and 3 times about who this pension did not apply to. These new pension arrangements. And yet people say, wait, aided by the then former leader of the opposition, whose sole complaint, thank you, member for St. Michael West, thank you, telling us that the 40 years. Go back and read my speech. Go back and read the transcript. I was very, very clear, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to make it known. Read it. For all new employees to the public service, the maximum pension will be attained after 40 years of service instead of 33 and a third years. What did I say? For all who? Oh, the word is too short a word, NEW. But I suppose since it's a new parliament and he doesn't want to recognize anything called new, because that will only remind him of the fact that he lost his deposit. All jokes aside, this government has worked hard in settling and negotiating. When you see me traveling overseas, it's not for my thing. We are working hard to negotiate space and to negotiate a shield to protect Bajans. There are others who would want us to have done this in a way that would have had existing employees contribute to their own pensions, and we said that's not how we do it here. That we're going to make other adjustments, that what we will do is that we will bring on the new employees and those who are promoted to above the insurable earnings for the first time, or appointed to above the insurable earnings after the applicable date of January 1st next year, that they will then contribute. Now, most other countries in the world, people contribute to their pensions. In the private sector, people contribute to their pensions. And this is not the first time that the government of Barbados has had to make adjustments to pensions. Under the right Honourable Owen Arthur, the pension age moved from 65 to 67 and a half. Under the right excellent Errol Walton Barrow, there was a time in the early 1970s when you could have drawn two pensions, the government pension and the NIS pension. But he then knew it was unsustainable. And we have to be able to have difficult and complex conversations. When your children start to mature and move from childhood to puberty, you don't have to have difficult conversations with them. When you're in a relationship, you don't have to have difficult conversations sometimes. When you're in a working environment, you don't have to have difficult conversations. Since when do we believe that a government is a fairy tale entity that can boom, boom, boom and praise you? That's why the last government got us where we were. Spare the rod and do what? Within the different, at this level, spare the rod and spoil the child. So I am saying to you that, look, this government has people who love this nation, who want to see this country prosper. But we also know that there's something called growing pains. And we also know that if outside is raining and a hurricane coming, that you would be a mad person to go outside in a hurricane or a tornado. And you have to stay inside and shield people then. There is a global hurricane. There is a global hurricane. It has moved from pandemic to exogenous shocks and global supply disruptions, commodity price increases, and if we thought we had seen the worst of it now, of all the countries, the two countries, if it was any other two countries that wasn't producing 30% of the world's grain, you might have get away. But the world has so relied on Russia and Ukraine to feed it, to provide it with the metal ores that are necessary for industrial development, that we are now in this position. Now, it is a lesson. It is a lesson. And that is why Walter Rodney's seminal piece of work, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is appropriate. Because if all of the extraction was not taking place in the North Atlantic countries to the extent that it was, and if there was equitable development across the world, we would not be facing the scale of adjustment that we are now about to face in those circumstances. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I hope and I trust that the member for Christchurch East Central will work with the Public Affairs Department and the Government Information Service to ensure that all 20,500 odd public servants understand what is the intention of this government. The reason why you call something grandfathering is because it puts a ring around you and excludes you. Now, there are those who will say, oh boy, why are you doing that to me? I joined the service in January 2023. Well, people who joined the service, teaching service in the 1980s didn't get long leave neither. It was an anachronistic term and condition of the past. The member for St. Andrew was a teacher at some point. He didn't get long leave. The member for St. Thomas, she didn't get long leave. Then there are those who got 2 pensions in the early 70s. Those of you who work now for the government of Barbados don't get that benefit. And similarly, we're corrected. And why? Look at the growth of our outlay for pensions. And I'll ask the member for Christchurch East Central to also make that available to the country. We are almost spending almost 10% of our expenditure on pensions alone. It is unsustainable, Mr. Speaker, and if we want to make sure that this country is good for the long haul, then we need to make these adjustments now, and we're doing it in the least harmful way to the people who are here. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also want to just quickly address the issue of water. And I'm told that there are a few people who were upset and said that their water rates have gone up. I told you that up front. I didn't hide my mouth. I told you that there are a few people who are getting from the BADMC water at 66 cents a cubic meter, or sorry, let me put it a different way, are paying 66 cents for 220 gallons of water. 66 cents for 220 gallons of water. And that has been the rate for decades. How much? 2 brown mints, I'm told. 2 brown mints for 220 gallons of water. Successive governments did not increase it. But successive governments did not face a climate crisis. Successive governments did not have to deal with droughts. Successive governments did not have to deal with parishes. When I was a child growing up, how many parishes were without water? You never heard anybody really suffering from being without water. The most you had was whether water was delivered to the district. And thanks to the Barbados Labour Party under Tom Adams, water and electricity was effectively delivered to almost every district other than the one that they then moved in St. James when it was too costly, and they moved out the people right there going up by, I forget the name of the district now, Spring Head. And they moved the people from Spring Head out to Sion Hill. I thank the member for St. James North for reminding me specifically. So that we didn't have those issues. But what is even more is that in spite of that amount being 66 cents for 220 gallons of water and people earning from it, the receivables of the BADMC are uncontrollable and inexplicable. And we can't afford it anymore. BADMC is one of those agencies that has to be rationalized along with BAMC and BACT. But apart from anything else, their core business is not the provision of water. The core business of the Barbados Water Authority is the provision of water. And apart from anything else, there is a 1951 Act, the Underwater Control Act, passed by Sir Grant Lee's cabinet and the Parliament of 1951, the first parliament of an enfranchised Barbados. But in spite of that parliament saying that all private abstractions should be controlled and regulated by the Water Board as it was then, and the Water Works Department as it was then called, for 71 years. You see why I feel like a vacuum cleaner? For 71 years, it was not done. But we don't have the luxury, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of ignoring it anymore. We knew for the last 30 years that we were a water-scarce country. But yet we didn't apply the seriousness to adapt and to augment water. And we knew that the mains were leaking badly. For at least 15, 20 years, we've known that. And yet we've only replaced just under 2% of the 2,500 kilometers of water mains in this country. 2%. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is why this government has said it cannot kick the can down the road anymore, because there is no more road to kick it on. Last year, after the ashfall, we reached the worst possible situation, where about 7 parishes were without water. That's why we had to buy all of those water trucks. I say to you that this government has been reasonable. We have settled on a price of $1.80 for agriculture for 220 gallons of water. The households, the poorest people in this country, pay $2.48 for that same 220 gallons for up to 8 cubic meters, so up to 1,660 gallons, they pay $2.48 for every 220 gallons. There are people who ask, what about the garbage and sewage contribution fee? Good dear. If we bring it down to 180, it is to be able to reflect the fact that the GSC is based on 50% of that. So if we left you at the 248, you would pay $1.24. But we bring it to 180, which means that you're only paying 90 cents in GSC now. As opposed to 248 plus 124, which would have you paying $3 and something cents. Almost double the amount at what is the current lowest tariff known to the Barbados Water Authority before my speech on Monday. And we've said, look, for those who have private wells, we're not imposing, we know that for 70 years, all of this has happened. The member for St. Michael Southeast, who is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Water Resources, will have conversations with you to arrive at a fair amount. But what we know is that a water-scarce country in a climate crisis cannot get away with not measuring the private abstraction of water, and certainly not having some level of remuneration, because the water does not belong to them, it don't belong to me, it don't belong to any of us in here, it belongs to the patrimony of the country. Big fancy word for the fact that it belongs to everybody. Everybody. And if it belongs to everybody, then the government must act in trust in the protection of it and in the nurturing of it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, those are the few matters that stood out. There are a number of other things that I didn't talk about in this debate related to economic activity. I didn't talk, for example, about our efforts to continue to bring more land into production for food. And I want to commend the Minister of Agriculture, for whom I have been exceptionally hard on. And he knows why, not because I want to be hard, but we are at that stage where we must do better at feeding ourselves. And I don't have time put down, and none of us got time put down. And it's a good thing that we've been rushing, because Russia come upon Ukraine. It's the truth. Similarly, the President of Guyana has also insisted that even before the construction of the Barbados-Guyana Food Terminal, that they want to ensure that we do all that we can to bring food prices down. And I've asked the Minister of Agriculture to speak with Barvin and the other farmers, because there is a possibility of cooperative arrangements even now before we build the terminal. because we don't want people to starve while we wait to build the terminal. And I really want to commend him and thank him for his cooperation with us on these matters pertaining to food and nutritional security. I haven't spoken about the fact that we have also agreed to do the 6,000 hospitality workers training again. I haven't spoken to the fact that because Barbados has access potentially to at least 700,000 tourists and land-based tourists in a good year, and 900,000 cruise ship tourists, and then a resident population of 300,000, a collective market of about 2 million people, that we have agreed that we will establish a gold exchange in Barbados. Just as you have a gold exchange in Dubai, that Barbados should be that place where people can come and buy gold, and Guyana then has a larger market through their vendors and their jewelers to be able to sell to that larger market from Barbados, and Barbadians and Barbados, who then is the host for that exchange, will also benefit in a way that we would not otherwise benefit. These are the things that we're doing, and I can call off a whole host of other initiatives. A whole host of other initiatives. I haven't spoken to the fact, and I want to thank the member for Christchurch West, who today updated this honourable chamber, because the numbers I had, as I told you at the day, on Monday, were still a work in progress. That shows that we will add, we believe, close to 1,854 new hotel rooms within the next 3 years in this country, and I know it's going to be more than that because this doesn't have one all. And that would be at an investment of just under 1.4 billion, 1.38 billion to be precise. And that we expect it to generate 6,146 jobs, and that's why the Honourable Minister of Education is being asked, as she is doing so quickly and expeditiously, to establish the Construction Gateway Training Program, of which she spoke in her debate, and I thank you for that. And that will lead ultimately to 4,115 jobs. And that does not include the rooms being built at Apes Hill, for which the investment at Apes Hill is literally going to be in excess of 100 million US in the initial years. And I think the overall investment comes close to 300 million US, just over 300 million US over the 5-6 year period. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the future of this country is potentially bright. But it is like most things in life, we have to work to secure it. And we have to ensure that in working to secure it, that we do so fairly. Because on 166 square miles, you cannot have the great disparity between wealth and poverty. You just can't accommodate it on 166 square miles. And that is why all of us were brought up in the same way that Rihanna was brought up. She saw people, and when the rest of the cosmetics world refused to acknowledge that there were different shades, not just the quadroons as the French would call them, and the different 14 or 15 shades that the French would have for them, she saw all, and she put before the market every possible shade. And what happened to her makeup product and her company? To the top it went. And when it came to lingerie, we were taught that only people who had a certain Coke bottle figure of certain proportions should be seen modeling lingerie. And the girl from Westbury Road took the world by storm and said there was nothing wrong with a pregnant woman wearing lingerie. There was nothing wrong with a woman who was an amputee wearing lingerie. There's nothing wrong with people who were maimed wearing lingerie. There was nothing wrong with people who fat wearing lingerie. There was nothing wrong with old people wanting to show the body. Remember for Christchurch, West Central. That sense of inclusion is as Bajan as it gets. And that is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I say to you that I am proud that the public of Barbados recognize more than any other word, the word that they have used in this budget is that it was fair. And in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a war, for a government coming out of an election. Last government came out of the election and carried us to the Hilton and tell us that we had to make an adjustment and they were sending home people. Praise up everything before the election and lick us up after. Last election in Wharton, I told the country, same night I said, give me the vote and watch me, I said we may have to go to the IMF. I hid my mouth before the election. This election, I said that we will consult with the people and determine if we have to go back to the IMF. The truth is that I was far more hopeful before the war. But now we're going to take our time and talk and measure because we will not put the people of this country at risk for any reason whatsoever. There is no pride that is worth it. And the old people tell us all the time that pride comes before a fall anyhow. But I give the country the assurance that the consultation will be wide, as I said, locally and internationally and regionally. But above all else, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I give the country the assurance that this government will continue to shield those who must be shielded, but reach for the skies in terms of growth. And I know that the new initiatives that we have in here, many say, oh, you can get all of that done. Well, I might not get 100%, but I can die trying. And I'm not going to come close. And I can say that the Deputy Prime Minister knows the same thing. The Attorney General knows the same thing. The member for St. James Central, who is the Minister of Commerce and Trade, knows the same thing. The member for St. George South knows the same thing. The member for Christchurch East knows the same thing. The member for St. James Central South, St. James South knows the same thing. The member for St. Philip South, St. John, St. Peter, St. Michael South, St. Michael West Central, Christchurch East Central, Christchurch West, Christchurch West Central, St. Philip West, new members, St. Michael North, new members, St. Andrew, new members, City of Bridgetown, new member, St. Michael West, new member, and then St. Lucie, and then, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the elders who will guide us, St. Thomas, St. Michael East, St. James North. I like to feel he's a young boy, but... And of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, yourself, St. Michael Central, and in their absence, St. Michael South Central and Christchurch South. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and St. George North, who is out of the island. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the collective representation of the Barbadian spirit, and we are duty-bound to reflect it in our decisions. We have not chosen the hand that we have, but we shall play the hand that we have the best way we know, fairly, honestly, and with pride, because we know that if we do it to the best of our ability, that we will do well and we will carry as many of our people with us as is our obligation. Those who went before us did it, and they faced challenges. And I am confident, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the people of this nation and the government of this nation, working together along with every sector and partner in this nation, can make Barbados make this journey through these choppy and turbulent waters. As one people, we will lift up this nation, our Barbados, and we will carry as many people as we can humanly carry. I'm obliged to you, and I pray that the public of Barbados meet us on the journey of doing as best they can with their productivity, with the quality of their service, with a smile on their face, even if you're vexed, it in everything that you say when you're vexed. But we will do it together because that is what is necessary to get us to the end. Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I sit, there are a number of appendices that I would want to make sure are part of the record of this honourable debate. And those appendices start as follows, sir. The first appendix relates to the summary of measures, Appendix A. I make that a document of the House. The second appendix, Mr. Speaker, is the fiscal performance. You would note that I took an approach similar to Mr. Barrow in the late 1970s, where instead of giving all of the outturned figures in his speech, he preferred to give it in an appendix. And I do it because the truth is that 90% of the public don't understand when you start calling 303.67 billion, this and net, this, a lot of mumbo jumbo. But it is here for who needs to know. So that is Appendix B. Appendix C is an assessment of the international developments, because we felt that it was important that when the records of this kind of House are looked at, that people understand the international developments dispassionately against which this was done. Appendix C was the debt and financing issues. Appendix D, needs of the country. Appendix D is the international development analysis. Appendix E is the list of selected zero-rated items. Appendix F is the tariff rates of vehicles for personal transport. Appendix G is the increases on the proposed national insurance insurable earnings ceilings from 2023 to 2035. And Appendix H is that scandalous sheet that shows what you will earn in a bank as compared to what you will earn in 4% dividends, 4% interest bonds, and what you will earn in dividends with a 10% rate of interest. It is called investment options, but it is better known as the sheet of scandal, because nobody could ever believe that after 10 years of $1,000 in a bank account, 20 years of $1,000 in a bank account, that you will only earn $10, not even $1 per year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with these few words, I'd like to commend in particular all honourable members for their commitment, their speech. I've told you how proud I am of them, but like the others who have spoken, the special mention goes to the new members of Parliament, who have all acquitted themselves in a way that makes me know that Barbados' future is safe. Barbados' future is safe. I thank you, and I ask all Barbadians, please, let us stay tuned. Let us recognize that we live in a moment, just as we did in the last 2 years, where gas and brakes will be pressed according to the needs of the particular moment in the nation. But if there's one thing I know, we are all in this together. And if ever there was a time to remember that passage from Ecclesiastes, it is now, that there is a time and season for everything. And this now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the time to plant, is the time to build, is the time to nurture. There will be a time when we will get to reap, but it is not yet now. Thank you. I'm obliged. Deputy Speaker, beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be sent to Standing Finance Committee and recommitted.
The question is that this... The question is that I do now leave the chair and the House revert to Standing Finance Committee. All those members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
There it comes.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that head 10 stand part as amended.
The question is that heads 10 stand part as amended. All honourable
You
members
really
in
need to
favour,
tell the
please say
country
aye.
where it is, though.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, before we go, I think the honourable member may want to tell the country what the sums are for. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the Office of the President has requested. Hold on. Can you hear me? The Office of the President, Mr. Chairman at State House, will be doing some renovations with respect to the state of the kitchen, and that is responsible for the amendment. The renovation of the kitchen at State House.
Honourable member, I'm having some difficulty hearing you.
Can you hear me? Hello? Oh. Right, sorry, Mr. Chair, I was saying that the reason for the adjustment is a move-in with respect to the renovation of the kitchen at State House. And therefore, those sums have been approved with respect to being able to outfit the kitchen at State House. With those few words, Mr. Chair, I beg to move that head 10 stand part as amended.
Wait a second, that, sir.
Question is head 10 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me? Yes. To support the work of the Parliamentary Commission, the reason for the variation is to make those provisions with respect to the constitutional provisions. So, with those few words, I beg to move that head 12 stand part as
Wait a
amended.
second, that, sir.
The question is that head 12 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, the move-in with respect to Prime Minister's office relates to the reassignment of the Roasteries program from the Ministry of Environment to the PMO's office, which is responsible for the variation in the addition to head 13. And so, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that head 13 stand part as amended.
Wait a second, that, sir.
The question is that head 13 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 15, Cabinet Office is amended, $17,869,302.
Mr. Chair, oh yes. Oh. The Constitutional Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission is under Cabinet Office, and that is the reason for the move-in with respect to Head 15. So I beg to move that Head 15 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
Question is that Head 15 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. We think the ayes have it.
Head 34, Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment as amended, $138,483,130.
Chair, with respect to Head 34, is additional provision with respect to the population housing census, as well as extra resources made available to the Statistics Department. And so, with those few words, Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Head 34 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that Head 34 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 35, Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs as amended, $98,295,217.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Head 35 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that Head 35 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 81, Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, $129,822,989.
Variation in the sums with respect to Head 81 relates to provision for the persons who continue in the program with respect to the ASH originally, but now the National Cleanup Program. And therefore, I beg to move that Head 81 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that Head 81 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 82, Ministry of Environment and National Beautification as amended, $53,684,885.
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated earlier, the movement of the Roofs to Reefs program from the Ministry of Environment to PMO precipitates obviously the adjustment in Head 13 before, as well as Head 82 at this particular point in time. So it's the movement of the program from one head to the other, and therefore I beg to move that Head 82 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that Head 82 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2 as amended.
Chairman, as a consequence, the value of the appropriation has increased to $1,862,898,498, and therefore I beg to move and therefore I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part as amended.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part as amended. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The schedule as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule as amended be the schedule to the bill.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that the schedule as amended be the schedule of the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in Standing Finance Committee, the standing of one bill as amended in Standing Finance Committee.
Wait a second.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in Standing Finance Committee as amended. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of Standing Finance Committee reported the passing of one bill in Standing Finance Committee as amended.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that it be read a third time. Third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think that the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be now cited as the Appropriation Act 2022.
This bill be now cited as the appropriation. This bill be now passed and so cited as the Appropriation Bill 2022. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it. This bill now stands passed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of a resolution to grant the sum of $61,584,077 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2021-2022 as shown in Supplementary Estimates Number 8, 2021-2022.
Return to government business, sir. Order number 5 on the supplementary order paper, name the honorable leader of the House to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee, consider grant of sums of money for the service of this island.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
The question is that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
$50 million. We can do public service.
Do you have a copy of it? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, the sums being requested is actually $50,000 for the purpose of remuneration in relation to members of the commission, as well as various advertisements with respect to publication of vacancies, as well as the remuneration for doctors who would perform assessments with respect to medical boarding of public officers. And therefore, relatively routine and straightforward, Mr. Chair, in relation to the Ministry of the Public Service. So with those very few words, sir, I'd beg to move that head 11 stand part.
Better second that, sir.
The question is that head 11 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 86, Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. The sums requested in the amount of $61,534,077 largely relate to two institutions, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and also the Ministry of Health and Wellness. In respect of the request from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, which stands in the amount of $15,407,819, relates to personal emoluments for community health liaison officers. It also requires us to continue some works on the assets under construction and to meet some obligations in respect to contractor payments. As you will recall, House may recall, the Ministry of Health and Wellness undertook works in respect of the outpatient clinic at St. Joseph and St. Andrew. And as a result of the repairs through that project, we owe some contractors some outstanding amounts, and this is intended to fulfill that obligation. Mr. Chairman, we also undertook some repairs at some polyclinics across the island, and as a result, the sums so voted would help us to enhance our primary care services. In respect of the lab, Besto Santos lab, as you are well aware, the Delta variant caused us to have to increase procurement activities there. We had to procure some additional test kits, and as a result of that, we had to request additional funding in order to help us manage this pandemic. The other matters, Mr. Chairman, in respect to supplies, materials, for example, in the psychiatric hospital, where the amounts required are to supplement the funds that would have been originally voted in the estimates for the provision of food. In addition, there's a professional services vote of some $400,000 there. That relates largely to us having to sanitize the compound. As you're aware, the psychiatric hospital was the subject of some outbreaks with respect to COVID, and obviously the institution had to take the necessary sanitization in order to prevent any further outbreaks. In respect of the district hospital, geriatric district hospital, the sums requested there, like I said, for additional food supplies and materials. And in respect of the Gordon Cummins district hospital, we have some sums requested for the provision of water under the subhead or the subcode 207 for utilities. In respect of the St. Lucie District Hospital, there is a requirement for a new commercial dryer and washer at that facility, and we've so requested that. In respect of the HIV/AIDS program, there were additional requests for some medication, and the sums so requested, $300,000, would go a long way in supporting that project. In respect to the National Crisis Management, as we refer to the COVID vote, the request is for additional 900,000 there, and that is to assist us with the execution of the works that we are continuing under that program, and also to supplement personal emoluments for that program. As you members are aware, the National Crisis Management Program, the COVID program, has assisted us in the most fundamental way in us trying to manage the COVID situation. In respect of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the sums requested are largely to settle the accounts payable arrears. Some 30.7 million is requested to settle the recurrent expenditure. Obviously, we had to operate the isolation facilities at schools and also hotels until the home isolation program is mainstream. Additional sums in the amount of 2.390 million were requested. Those funds requested to complete the painting of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, also to facilitate payments to the accident and emergency upgrade. We have some contractors that we have to pay. We also have some contingent repairs that we have to do in respect of the incinerator at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which obviously needs upgrade. It's pretty much an end-of-the-life system, and we are moving to enhance that. Critically, the sums also included in this vote in the capital works for the QH relate to the air conditioning system that we have at the operating theaters there. We have some systems, six operating theaters there, but because it's a central system, we have to move with dispatch to ensure that we protect and maintain the air conditioning unit and system generally to ensure that there's no further delay in respect of any surgeries. Now, in respect of the other matters relating to COVID, simply it's relating to the cost of operating and maintaining the hospital and to pay, like I said, some outstanding arrears associated with the Delta wave variant that we experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Mr. Chairman, in closing, the sums requested are significant, but obviously absolutely necessary to maintain our premier acute care medical facility, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, as well as to ensure that we have sufficient funds to maintain all of our hospitals, including psychiatric, geriatric, and to conclude works associated with property maintenance at all of the aforementioned institutions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I beg that Head 86 stand part.
The question is that Head 86 stand apart. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Deputy Speaker the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee.
Beg to second that, sir.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one money resolution in Standing Finance Committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of Standing Finance Committee reported the passing of one resolution. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a first time.
Second that, sir.
The question is that this resolution be read a first time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
Second that, sir.
The question is that this resolution be read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say no. Nay. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be agreed to.
The question is that this resolution be agreed to. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
Nothing else, right? You're good? What's your first name, Jackie? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's sitting, and speaking on the adjournment, let me first of all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank all honourable members for their contributions today. Obviously, at the top of that list is the Honourable Prime Minister for her presentation in this budget. And I would want to also take the opportunity to thank, in particular, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, who has been very instrumental, along with the Clerk of Parliament and all of the other staff, in trying to ensure that we were able to get back into this chamber. It has been a long time in coming, and a lot of work had to go into coordinating and getting us back here. Granted, it is not in the state that we would all like, but it is certainly better than where we were to some extent, and certainly better than how it was when we left it. Speaking on the adjournment as well, I would want to thank the Royal Barbados Police Force, thank all of the catering staff, and all of the people who've made the transition back to this facility possible. I know it's not an easy task, the pressures that everybody has been put under, but I think I can speak on behalf of all honourable members in saying we truly appreciate the effort that has been made to coordinate both this house and the other place over the course of the last couple of days so that we could do the business of the people. I would also want to take this opportunity to express condolences to the family of one of our Hansard reporters, Ms. Gill, who this morning succumbed to heart attack, I believe, and died. And we are deeply and sadly affected by the loss. And I want to extend sympathy to all of the persons here who have worked with her as well, and to her entire family. As I close, this has been another arduous task that we've had to do. Honourable members know how difficult things are in the public domain as we represent all of our constituents, but I know that we appreciate that these policies that we have been able to pass here today will hopefully redound to the benefit of all of our residents and all of our citizens. And it is really, as the Prime Minister said, it's really up to us now, not only ministers, but public servants, private sector individuals, and the entire country to be able to rally around what I believe has now been a balanced budget, but also policies that will help us to transform the Barbados economy. And therefore, and civil society. And so therefore, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to say and commend you for the work over the last 2 days. You have assumed the position as though it was always yours, and I hope the Honourable Substantive Speaker has no doubt been watching on, and I hope he doesn't feel as though you will replace him permanently. But you've done an excellent job, and congratulations to you on the position. And with those few words, I beg to move the adjournment of the House until Friday, the 25th of March at 10 a.m.
The question is that the House be adjourned until the 25th of March, 2022 at 10 a.m. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned until the 25th of March, 2022 at 10 a.m. sharp.